In a diner on the west side of Colorado Springs, a man enters with a mission.
Richardson.
Yeah.
And he recognized the description of the man that he was supposed to meet.
Coffee?
Thank you.
So you understand what you're supposed to do?
Some people you want me to scare, right?
It's not scare.
You mean?
This is all the information you need. You need to kill the mother first. And then I need you to go back and kill the baby. You understand?
Yeah, I do.
I was outside the city doing an interview in the county. I was on my way back.
Match to Kenda.
Go for Kenda.
Because radio equipment in the 80s and 90s wasn't that good. There were a lot of dead spots, particularly on the outskirts of the city.
Memorial Hospital, an infant in critical condition, child unresponsive.
I make out the words infant, child, and unresponsive. And the concern of the dispatcher was this could involve child abuse involving a death.
10-4, Kenda out.
That's not something I take lightly.
At the hospital,
Hey,
Kenda is briefed by Detective J.D. Walker.
so what do we got?
The victim's name is Samantha DeFazio, 9 months old. Her parents, Tony and Stella, they're in the room with her now.
Tony and Stella are young, 24. He's selling insurance, she's working as tech support, and she's going to school.
The daycare worker who called it in, Wanda Crawford, she's in the waiting room.
Wanda Crawford cares for 5 kids in her private residence.
Feel better?
And she was taking care of Samantha at the time of this situation.
So what happened?
The nurse doesn't know. We have limited information right now.
At this important investigation, all we know is that Samantha suddenly stopped breathing.
Outside inside.
Outside the hospital room, Kenda and Walker get a closer look at a grim scene.
Excuse me, doctor.
Yes.
Can you tell us the baby's condition?
The most important thing on a child abuse investigation is the injuries and the timeline of those injuries.
She's suffering from a subdural hematoma.
And so I learned from that doctor that Samantha is suffering from a brain bleed.
The prognosis does not look good, but we're going to do everything we can.
And the baby was injured at daycare?
Not necessarily. It could have happened at home and worsened later. We have some more tests to run before we know for sure, and I'll try to keep you posted.
Thank you.
Let's go see what Wanda Crawford has to say.
Wanda is the last person in contact with this baby that observes some sort of injury.
Miss Crawford?
So we want to speak to her to determine what may have happened.
I'm Lieutenant Kenda. This is Detective Walker.
Is she going to be okay?
Oh, I'm sorry to say it's not looking good. The doctor's doing everything that they can.
I can't believe this is happening. Poor, sweet baby.
Wanda Crawford looks like absolutely the person you would want to trust your child with. She just seems like rock solid and really concerned.
You can start by telling us a little bit about your daycare service.
Well, I run it out of my home, but, you know, it's just me. I don't have any other employees.
She reports that she is licensed by the state of Colorado, and she's been babysitting Samantha for 7 months.
Do you have any children of your own? Are you married?
I don't have kids, but yes, I am married.
Her husband is James Darnell. He doesn't have any part of the daycare center, but he is a school bus driver for elementary kids.
So what happened this morning? What time did Samantha arrive?
Well, Stella dropped her off around 8 on her way to work. And then I guess it was like around 9:30 or so that I went to check on Samantha and noticed, you know, Samantha was having issues.
Wanda said that when she hears Samantha cry, she observed her kicking like she was having convulsions.
I didn't know if she was breathing.
Wanda said when she got closer, it appeared that the baby had thrown up a bunch of mucus and was having trouble breathing.
I thought maybe she was having a seizure, so I called 911 right away.
What do you think caused Samantha's injuries?
I'm not really sure. I would talk to Stella. You know, maybe something happened at home before she dropped Samantha off.
She immediately notified Stella, the mother of the child. She would go to the hospital and meet Stella there, but she had to make arrangements with these other children before she could leave. So from her initial story, in our opinion, she proceeded correctly. Nothing about anything she said alarmed us in any way.
In my experience, there's a lot of child abuse committed by the parent. Through disciplining the child, if you lose your temper and jerk on them, you could cause injury.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, Stella seems like a really nice person. But sometimes the way she just plops the baby off during drop-off, it has me worried.
All right, well, thanks for talking to us.
Let me know if you need me.
What do you think?
I'm not sure. Let's talk to the parents. Why don't you take Tony, I'll take Stella.
During their conversations, Kenda and Walker will be looking for signs of a disconnect between parent and child.
Tony, I'm Detective Walker, Colorado Springs Police. I need to have a word with you.
Sure.
If a parent refers to their child as it, for example, they don't use the child's name. It's a distance that is between them and that child. So if you hear that, then the alarms go off.
Walk me through the morning before work.
No, just like any other morning. Help get Samantha ready for daycare.
Here we go. Yes.
Tony told me he strapped the baby in to get on their way to daycare.
I'll call you later.
I love you, babe.
Love you too.
And Samantha waved at him and said, Dada.
Yeah.
And they drove away.
All right.
At the other end of the hall, Kenda is listening to Stella's version of events.
It was a normal day. We got Samantha ready for daycare, and I dropped her off with Wanda around 8.
Stella said, all I know is Samantha was in perfect shape when I left her with Wanda Crawford.
And how would you describe your home life?
Good. I mean, it's hard because we both have to work, you know, but it's worth it. Samantha brings so much joy in our lives. I just can't believe this is happening to us.
Baby Samantha was absolutely the light of Tony and Stella's lives. It was a planned pregnancy. They really wanted this baby. There's nothing you can do to even touch the amount of grief they have. They're told that she likely won't make it through the night, and a priest actually comes to pray for her and give her last rites. And it's all been so fast for them. You know, it was one day. This wasn't like something, you know, that had developed 3 weeks ago and just started to careen. It was like this morning, she was their baby who was waving goodbye to her dad and saying, Dada.
I'm very sorry. Thank you.
Paging Dr. Young. Dr. Young, emergency 3.
So what do you think?
What he told me made sense.
Yeah, Stella too.
To both Walker and I, they come across as quite truthful.
What do you say we stop by Wanda's house, see if we can pick up some sort of lead there?
Yeah, that might be our best shot. I'll meet you over there.
All right.
Wanda's home is a potential crime scene. It occurred in her house. So let's go see what it can tell us, if anything.
Try again.
Where is she?
Oh, hi, detectives. I hope you haven't been staying out here too long.
Wanda looks like she's under the influence of alcohol and acts like it. She's sort of a little bit wandering in her speech and on her feet.
Miss Crawford, have you been drinking?
Well, yeah, I had a couple of scotches. I couldn't stop thinking about that poor baby, and I needed to take my mind off of what happened.
Well, that's a little odd. Okay, fine, you're home.
You mind if we take a look inside your house?
Come right in. This is my husband, Jim. He just got home from work. This is where I take the kids, play. It's a little bit messy. I haven't had time to clean up, though.
Nothing about this home indicates anything other than a normal type of residence you would see who is in the daycare providing business.
Do you have a copy of your daycare license and the CPR certificate the state requires?
You bet. Let me go get it.
Do you mind turning that off for the time being?
So what, you're gonna interrogate my wife?
Wanda's husband, Jim, is not quite the nurturant, warm counterpart that you would expect to this woman.
He doesn't talk a whole lot. I kind of felt that he had something that he was hiding.
Okay, here you go. One signed daycare license and one signed CPR certification.
Can I hold on to these for now?
Sure, honey. Whatever you need.
Where was the baby when you found her?
Oh, right over there next to the chair. That's where she threw up.
So I go over to where Samantha was laying and started feeling the carpet.
It's totally dry.
That's because I caught most of the vomit in a washcloth when she threw up.
So then I asked her where the cloth was, and she said, I've already washed it and put it away. I felt she was covering her tracks.
Wanda, we need you to be totally straight with us. Is there something you're not telling us?
And then she says something out of the blue that's completely different from what she said earlier in the day.
I already told you everything. I came in to check on Samantha. She was standing there drinking her bottle. She fell back and hit her head.
Is that so?
Really? She's changed her story completely to something that's a physical impossibility. A 9-month-old baby standing up and drinking at the same time, keeping its balance? Please, not possible. Not at age 9 months.
So you actually saw this happen?
Huh?
Wanda, you're being a little careless with the truth. We are trying to determine the nature of the injury to this child, a 9-month-old baby named Samantha DeFazio, and who may be responsible for such a terrible thing. And we're beginning to be very concerned about the daycare provider, Wanda Crawford.
All right, Wanda, we're looking into a few things. We'll be in touch.
Okay, I'll be here.
She's full of crap. Let's get hold of that 911 call.
Sounds good.
The 911 Emergency Contact Center maintains recordings of all calls. They can produce a cassette tape from their master tape.
Ready?
So we listen to it.
I run a daycare over here on Rushmore Drive, and one of the babies doesn't appear to be breathing.
Can you perform CPR on the baby?
No, I don't know CPR.
Wait, what?
We have her CPR certification that she had in her home. But yet, if she doesn't know anything about CPR, then how does she have a certification?
She's either grossly incompetent or she's lying.
Yeah, something's not right.
I'll see what I can find.
Sounds good.
I checked her status as a care provider, and I learned that there were 6 complaints.
In one of those, a 6-month-old baby had been found comatose and unresponsive in Wanda's care, which is remarkably similar to the current circumstances of Samantha DeFazio.
Lieutenant, can't say I'm not surprised.
We submitted our certification that she had for CPR to CBI, Colorado Bureau of Investigation State Laboratory, as a unit referred to as the Question Documents Unit. And they examine things to determine forgeries, signature verifications, and so on. They conducted an examination of the certification.
Wow.
They determined it was a forgery.
Unbelievable.
The woman's a complete fraud.
It is not hard to get a CPR certification, and it never has been. She easily could have gotten that. Plus, if she had any sense of responsibility, she would have done that. Instead, she forged it. So it means to me that A, she really didn't care about these kids because she didn't have the knowledge, basic knowledge, required by the state to be caring for them. She was not above forgery. And that leads us to the whole, why was she in this business to begin with?
Yeah, I wouldn't want my kids anywhere near her. All right, thank you.
Daycare is really hard to find, and the younger a child is, it's harder and more expensive.
So you're gonna pick up Sam from daycare today, right?
Yeah, unless I work overtime, and then can you get her?
Yeah, no problem.
You've got two parents, they actually did their homework. They went to the registry and saw who was licensed. Yeah. Back then, that's about all you had to go on.
To make this a chargeable, winnable case, we need medical evidence to say what exactly happened to this child and when did it happen.
In order to learn more about baby Samantha's injuries, Kenda and Walker return to the hospital.
The doctors have now completed their thorough examination of this child.
And that's all in addition to the head and brain injuries I told you about earlier.
The child has serious and permanent nervous system injuries. The child's retinas were detached from her eyes, and the child is blind.
We want to know what you think about what we're being told about how these injuries occurred.
The daycare provider gave us a couple of different scenarios. One, that the baby was having seizures. Another, that it had fallen and bumped its head.
No, that doesn't work. Neither of those scenarios could have caused her injuries. I think it's a classic example of shaken baby syndrome.
Shaken baby syndrome is a medical diagnosis of picking up a small child and violently shaking them, causing their head to snap back and forth.
The number one reason for shaken baby syndrome is the crying. Babies can cry relentlessly. It can all be very trying, and it starts to make you crazy. It doesn't take that much shaking to kill a baby. It's almost immediate.
Do you know what time this occurred?
Probably just before the medical personnel arrived, maybe 15 minutes.
The child had been in Wanda Crawford's home, by Wanda's own admission, alone with the child for 90 minutes when she called for medical assistance.
Lieutenant Kenda, dispatch.
So now, there's only one suspect, and it's Wanda Crawford.
While Kenda and Walker head back to the station, Patrol picks up Wanda to give her one last chance to come clean.
You're crazy, okay? I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't hurt that child.
Wanda, we have evidence that shows...
I don't care about your damn evidence. You're both a bunch of damn fools.
Wanda has moved from being Grandma Wanda into a shrieking woman, denying everything and calling us everything but human beings.
Wanda, I'm placing you under arrest. Please stand up.
I hope you both rot in hell.
Get up.
But even without a confession,
Hands behind your back.
Kenda has a pretty good idea on what happened to baby Samantha.
Stella DeFazio arrives as usual,
Hi, Miss Wanda.
provides the baby to Wanda Crawford.
You're all ready. See you later.
Bye.
Everything's pretty normal.
Uh-oh, that sounds like Samantha. Let's go see what's wrong, okay?
She heard Samantha crying in her crib upstairs,
Samantha, what's wrong, huh?
as babies do, but 90 minutes worth.
Hold still.
Wanda Crawford had a bad temper. And at that particular moment, that child crying was the last straw for her.
Shut up, shut up, shut up. Oh, God, you stinker-rat kid.
And she picked that child up and violently shook the child.
Oh, my God. Oh, go ahead.
Wanda shook Samantha so violently that the baby's turning black and not breathing. She's scared. She doesn't know what to do.
Yes, I run a daycare over here.
She then became concerned that baby was going to die, but she would have even greater difficulty explaining, so she called 911. And it unravels from there. The result of it is it puts her in jail.
While Wanda's arrest does bring some comfort to the DeFazio family, the injuries she inflicted on their daughter will never heal.
As a result of Samantha's injuries, she will spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. She can't see, she can't hear, she can't eat by herself. It's tragic.
Wanda Crawford is convicted and sentenced to the Colorado State Penitentiary for 18 years. She's 65 years old. It is likely she will not survive her sentence.
But unfortunately, Wanda's story is far from over. Faced with the prospect of a life behind bars, she desperately searches for a way out.
Hey, Jenny. I hear you're getting out of here in a few weeks. You thought any more about what I asked you?
What happens with Wanda Crawford is from the day she is sentenced, she starts developing her escape.
I'll get you the money once it's done. Make it look like a suicide.
And that escape is to put a hit on Stella DeFazio and Samantha DeFazio.
Do you know, Wanda, I always knew you were evil. I didn't know that you were that evil. Wanda Crawford's been convicted of child abuse, and Wanda's attempting to hire an assassin to kill Stella DeFazio and baby Samantha.
Yeah, Wanda approached another inmate named Jenny Larkin about doing the killing for her.
We get a call from the Department of Corrections.
We get a lot of jailhouse snitches that want to supply information to lighten their sentence.
Detectives meet with a prison informant to learn the details of Wanda's scheme.
Please have a seat. I'm Lieutenant Kenda, this is Detective Walker. Thank you for coming to talk to us.
You know, I was impressed with this inmate. Obviously, she was a much nicer person than Wanda, which doesn't say a lot, but she was nearly out. She wasn't going to mess it up. She, I think, might have been a little bit afraid of Wanda, and yet this did not prevent her from going to someone in authority and reporting this plot. And I thought, you know, I hope this kid went on to have a good life, because she apparently made a bad decision in her past, but boy, she made a good one there.
Can you tell us exactly what Wanda told you?
She's been looking for a way to get out of prison for a while now. She said when her husband Jim came to visit that they figured out how to do it.
Wanda wants to make it look like a suicide with a suicide note stating that Stella's the one that injured her baby, not Wanda.
Once everyone reads the note saying I didn't do it, they have no other option but to exonerate me.
It's crazy.
Look, there's $5,000 in it for you. My husband will give you all the information once you get out.
So Jim Darnell is involved in this plan too. But to build a case against him, we're going to have to show he has active involvement.
Would you be willing to help us just a little bit more?
Like how?
We wired the inmate and had her ask Wanda how to commit the murder.
What if she figures out I'm lying?
She won't. Just stick to the script.
She's told to tell Wanda that she's unwilling to do it herself because she's never done that sort of thing, but she has this cousin.
He said he'd do it if the money was right.
My husband Jim and I only got $5,000. Will that be enough?
I don't know, probably. I'll have to check with him though.
All right, here's what we're gonna need him to do, okay?
Wanda came up with this plan, how she wanted it done.
First, you gotta make sure that when he shoots her, he shoots from the right angle, because she's right-handed.
She tells how she wants the gun cocked to make it a shot in the right temple, to make it look like a suicide.
And then you gotta make the suicide note. It's real convincing.
She wants Stella DeFazio to write a suicide note saying, I hurt my baby and I made Mrs. Crawford take the blame. May God forgive me.
Oh yeah, and one other thing. Tell your cousin he's gotta kill Stella's baby.
What? The baby?
The kid's gonna suffer with these injuries her whole life, all right? It's the only humane thing to do.
Wanda, we knew you were a rat. We didn't know how much of one. Now we do.
Tell your cousin if he has any questions, talk to my husband Jim, okay?
These people should not be among us. They're dangerous, they're evil, they're without remorse. It just makes you want to go to the bathroom and vomit.
At this point in the investigation, we had enough on Wanda Crawford to charge her with the solicitation of murder charge. What we didn't have was the husband, James Darnell.
In order to nab James Darnell, Colorado Bureau of Investigations agent Lou Thompson is assigned to go undercover as Jenny's cousin.
You got a bus word picked out yet?
Not yet. Let's go with the word smoothie.
All right, on smoothie, we'll move in.
Now, does an undercover agent have to be an actor? Not really. You don't have to say much. You're supposed to be a stone killer. No one expects you to be talkative.
What we're looking for is for Jim to tell our undercover officer,
Richardson?
Yeah.
what he wants him to do. But we don't know if Jim Darnell is armed or what he's going to do if this thing goes sour.
So you understand what you're supposed to do?
Some people you want me to scare, right?
No, it's not scare.
You mean?
Yeah, that's right.
Jim confirms it. I want the baby dead. I want the mother dead. I want them all dead. Because I don't want to be alone. I want my wife out of prison.
And there's one more thing I need you to do.
Jim hands instructions on what he wants the suicide note to say.
Have Stella write this out just like it is before you do the job. You understand?
Yeah, I do.
And now we have sufficient evidence to convict everybody involved. We're ready. Let's arrest him.
Waitress, can I get a smoothie over here?
Your hands! Bruce, hands! Keep your hands up! Get up now! Get up!
Yes.
Garage!
You're under arrest.
He's slimy. Real.
All right, let's go. Let's go.
And the darling husband, Jim, is handcuffed. Taken to the county jail on this charge of solicitation to commit murder. And what do you know? Jim is almost as smart as his wife, and he speaks to an inmate.
Jim wanted to have a judge, a senior deputy district attorney, and the lead detective, me, killed for sending his wife to prison.
And what does this inmate do? Dutifully reports it, because it might be an advantage to him to so do. So now Jim gets hammered again for a second charge of criminal solicitation.
In 1998, James Darnell pleads guilty to criminal solicitation of first-degree murder. Wanda Crawford is given an additional 32 years on top of her original 18-year sentence.
Happily, Wanda Crawford never got out of prison to hurt anybody again. She died in prison at the age of 87, and so, sorry, vengeance is mine on this one. She lived a good damn long life behind bars, and well, she should have.
The real tragedy of this case is Samantha DeFazio. She missed out on so much in life because of one cruel person. She died before her 19th birthday.
The story is completely a parent's worst nightmare. But today, happily, if you have a child entering daycare, you can find out more about the provider. And it may take a little bit of digging, but it's definitely worth your time to look into. So do everything you can. Mine all of those resources, and don't be shy about it. And the one thing I would add is, do not ever be the least bit afraid to show up unannounced. Go see how it's going.
If you are frustrated with a child, walk away. The frustration will pass. If you succumb to your emotions and you cause enormous harm to that person, someone just like me is going to show up and grab you by the throat. It's unusual to have a person over the age of 60 suffer multiple gunshot wounds. Those kinds of crimes are reserved for the young.
I'm gonna get you for that one. A 12-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl were playing in the backyard of an apartment complex. Whoa. It was hot, it was summer, and they were just having a really good time.
Is that firecrackers?
Let's go check it out. They come around the corner, and what they wind up seeing is a woman covered in blood, slumped face up against the front of the building.
Within the hour, Kenda arrives at the apartment complex.
This is more of a retirement community, so the people there are generally older and they're naturally curious just as much as anybody else.
Some of these people view this as entertainment from their perspective. There's an old man sitting in a lawn chair, drinking a beer, and watching the proceedings like it's a movie.
She had multiple gunshot wounds in the head and chest. We just got word that she was DOA at Memorial Hospital.
They identified her as Dolores Wells. She's 64 years old, and she's a resident of the complex.
My mom moved into this apartment complex. She would meet people, and they would like her right away. And my mother was the strongest person that I've ever known.
Where was she found?
Follow me.
Looking at the crime scene, there's blood where the victim had slumped against the wall.
We also found these shell casings.
Wow, that's a lot.
Near the blood, there are 7 expended casings. The first indicator of that is a rage killing. Dolores probably knows the person responsible for her demise. When you empty the gun, it's because you're angry. And angry speaks to motive.
I need to see her! I need to see her!
You can't come through there. You can't go through
there. It's okay. Let her through. I got her.
A 10-year-old girl shows up on the scene. She's visibly upset, more so than just somebody being shot and killed. Something's personal here.
What's your name?
Jill.
Okay, Jill, what's going on?
She says that she was playing next door in another friend's apartment when she heard loud pops. And she looked outside and she saw a crowd gathering, and then she saw an ambulance arrive.
I saw them putting the person on the stretcher, and then I saw it was my grandmom. I didn't know what to do, so I just waited for the police to come.
I'm very sorry you had to see that.
Is she okay?
Well, she's in the hospital right now. We're not sure yet.
We're in a situation where this is not the time to tell her that her grandmother has died. We need emotional support for her, and it's not here.
Is your mother here?
No, she's back in Washington. I was here visiting my grandmom for my birthday.
Do you have any other family that lives nearby?
Yes, my Aunt Mary.
Do you know her phone number?
I think so.
So I had one of my officers notify the aunt by telephone and advise her to meet this child at police headquarters.
Okay, Jill, this officer's going to take care of you till your aunt gets here. Thanks for being so brave.
As I watched the child being escorted out to a police car, I noticed that the old man I first saw when I got there is still in his lawn chair, still drinking a beer, and he nods his acknowledgement to me. And I thought that was a little odd. Let that thought pass and go back to what I'm doing.
Less than an hour later, Mary Labb, Jill's aunt, arrives at headquarters.
Baby, I'm so sorry. You must be so scared.
After they told me what happened, I just totally lost it.
Aunt Mary, Grandma's hurt. She's hurt bad.
I can imagine that was quite a shock for her to be with my mom that morning and then to have something like that happen to her.
Ma'am, I know you were given information over the phone, and I apologize the way it was handled. Can I speak to you just for a minute before you go home?
Okay, you wait right here and then we'll go home.
She's able to tell us a little bit of the background of our victim. She says that her victim has lived in this apartment complex for a while and seemed to be loved by everybody.
She really loved her family, especially her grandkids. She just got her citizenship at age 65.
Mom was born in Trieste, Italy. She was in her 30s when she came to this country and was very determined in pretty much everything that she did.
Let's get you a job.
Back at the crime scene,
Nobody seen or heard anything?
Kenda continues to search for clues leading to Dolores Wells' killer.
We're talking to all the residents in the building, and they all pretty much say that Dolores Wells was wonderful. She was everybody's grandmother.
Oh no, that's terrible.
She'd love to cook and cooked big meals for some of the residents. She would make cookies for the children that lived in the nearby complexes, and they describe her as a sweet little Italian grandmother who loved life. One resident said that he had heard that Dolores had argued with one of the other tenants in the building.
I don't know him that well, but he's always yelling at someone, especially kids.
your typical angry old man.
He said he hangs around with another old guy, and they're both kind of mean old guys, and they sit in their lawn chairs and drink. So your thought returns to that man sitting in that lawn chair. He doesn't look upset. He's not distressed. He's unusual. It's not against the law to be unusual, but it's interesting to me when you're unusual 50 feet away from a dead woman.
Excuse me. I'm Detective Kenda.
He's apparently found a way to breed beer under his chair because he still has a beer.
Do you know anything about what happened here today?
You mean with Dolores?
That's right.
Yeah, it's real simple.
He turns and says,
I shot her.
Well, my. There are people who falsely confess to crimes to gain attention. They are generally older, they are lonely.
What's your name?
James Chapman. Friends call me Jim. Once I got left.
It's also entirely possible he shot Dolores Wells 6 times in the chest.
All right, Mr. Chapman. If what you're saying is true, I'm gonna have to place you under arrest. Stand up, put your hands behind your back.
The fact that he's an old man is meaningless. Policy dictates felony arrest requires handcuffs. For now, we own him.
Go ahead and put in a request for a search warrant for his apartment.
Okay, I'm on it.
I'm gonna head back inside. There's someone I want to talk to.
To learn more about Jim Chapman, Kenda sits down with Jim's best friend, Case Oman.
Does Jim have any mental issues?
No, he's just mad at the world.
We often hear a cliche about angry old white men. And the fact is that most angry old white men were angry young white men. And then as time went on, they just got a little bit worse at hiding their anger.
Mr. Oman explains that Jim's had 4 wives. He has 2 or 3 kids he doesn't really know, and a couple grandkids. They're all back in Louisiana, and they don't like him. And he's very happy with that.
So how does he know Dolores Wells?
Funny thing, they used to be close.
When my mom first moved into that place, she really didn't have any transportation. And she would cook him dinners for him taking her to the store. He seemed like a nice man.
Unfortunately, he wanted to be more than friends, and she had no interest.
Look, Jim, we talked about this.
I don't understand, Dolores. What is it about me that you find so repellent?
Jim, I like you, just not in that way.
You just like the rest of them. You're ungrateful.
You need to leave! Get out!
Don't worry, I don't want nothing to do with ungrateful you anyway.
You're just a sad old man! Pathetic!
My mom had mentioned that he started butting into her life and bothering her. My mom would never back down. She would come back with something.
So what happened between the two of them today?
All I know is Jim and I were outside having a beer when Dolores comes walking by.
Mr. Oman reports Dolores Wells comes out of her apartment with trash bags, and Jim Chapman glared at her.
Next thing I know, Jim gets up and walks away. He comes back. He had a gun in his pants pocket.
And that frightened him. What's he gonna do? Oh my God, he's got a gun.
Dolores!
No!
And then he heard 5 or 6 gunshots.
With little doubt that Jim Chapman is the killer, Kenda heads back to the station to hear the full story from Jim himself.
We want as much knowledge as we can possibly have to present to a jury.
I've got some more questions for you, Mr. Chapman.
Let's just get this over with so I can go to jail and get a peaceful night's sleep for a change.
In a jail, Jim? You think it's peaceful in a jail?
So tell me what happened. Why did you decide to shoot Miss Wells?
That woman was evil. I just couldn't take it anymore.
Jim says that he and Dolores were oil and water. They never got along. Well, that's not what the witnesses said. He claims she spread rumors about him in the neighborhood, and she did all these terrible things, none of which were true.
It all started with that brat granddaughter of hers raising hell outside my apartment. Hey! Knock it off! Take that damn ball and get the hell out of here!
Chapman says when he did that, Dolores Wells came out of her apartment, looked at him and said, "You cannot speak to my granddaughter like that."
You are just a miserable old drunk.
Dolores!
No wonder your family won't talk to you. Go back in your room and drink yourself back to sleep.
Chapman says that he was furious. The longer he thought about it, the more angry he became with what Dolores had said to him.
A little later on, Dolores walks out, taking out the trash, and that's when Jim decided to go upstairs and get the gun.
Not only does he go get a gun, he makes certain the gun is loaded with a maximum number of bullets. The weapon will carry 6 rounds in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. Jim made sure that 7th round was in the chamber.
What Jim has told us so far clearly constitutes premeditated murder. He could have stopped at any time, but he took deliberate acts to execute what he wanted to do.
Dolores!
She came back from the dumpster, and he said, "I want you to keep your mouth shut about me."
Jim!
Dolores!
He said at that moment,
No!
he pulled the gun and shot her once. She fell to the ground, stunned, and he felt he was sort of stunned too, but then he stepped forward and pumped the rest of the bullets into her body.
I remember my mom telling me they had had words in passing, but I had no idea it would come to that.
The search of Chapman's home provides the physical evidence to back up his confession.
We find a Jennings model J22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. It's pretty obvious that there's our murder weapon.
Jim Chapman is convicted of first-degree murder and is sentenced to life in prison.
Even though we didn't have her physically, she'll be with us forever. And my son's idolized her grandma. My son even got a tattoo of his grandmother on his arm so that she would be honored and never forgotten.
An angry old man who has no control over his temper, who takes someone's life for ultimately no reason at all except she stood up to him. What a waste for everyone.
Night slides over the Tagus like a slow bruise. A bell from the tram rattles down Rua de Bica, metal kissing metal, a tired song the city knows by heart. A girl in a dark coat moves against the current, hair pinned, eyes bright, a folded brochure of an exhibition at the Gulbenkian tucked in her pocket. She is 19. She is late. She turns the corner by the azulejo wall, chipped at the edge like a bitten plate. She glances back once, twice. Then the street swallows her. That is the last clean fact anyone agrees on. After that, the city talks. And Lisbon has a memory like salt. It preserves, it stings. Her name is Inez Duarte, if you ask the registrar. Just Inez, if you lived above the bakery where she bought Papo Secos on Thursday mornings. Architecture student, sharp pencils, a sketch of the Santa Justa elevator in the back of a notebook with coffee rings. She loved the long steps up to a view, the miracle of breath at a Miraduro, the way roofs looked like paper boats. On April 10th, 1993, she never came home. The landlady knocked at midnight. No answer. The door still locked from the outside. No note, no clothes missing, a plate on the counter with half an orange, the cut side turned toward the window, a fly walking the wet crescent. The landlady said a prayer, then another, then the phone call to the police. Morning found the alleys awake. Reporters sniffed along the stones. Neighbors leaned out with elbows on railings. Blue clotheslines sagged with towels like tired flags. So many eyes, so few witnesses. A bartender remembered her leaving at 22:17, calm, not drunk, no quarrels. A specificity that sounded too precise, too rehearsed, but it stuck. A taxi driver thought he saw her near Rossio, crossing against the light as if time had pockets in it. A fado singer lighted a cigarette in the doorway of a club and swore she caught the edge of Inez's voice humming a tune with no words. The city collected these fragments and taped them together into a narrative that could be repeated under breath. Cold case, they would say later, rolling the words like marbles in the mouth. Cold because the trail died. Case because we need boxes to hold our fear. Detectives came in pairs, a rhythm. One speaks, one watches. The first looked for patterns. The second listened for lies. They took the standard steps. Boyfriend, professor, neighbor with the gentle dog whose leash was always too tight, people who hated beauty, people in debt, men who smiled too long at bus stops. Lisbon is not a big city when you are hunting ghosts. Everyone knows the names by the second week. Cameras found the mother in a chair by the window. She held the exhibition brochure like a passport out of grief. Reporters asked about enemies. The mother said there are no enemies. Then she pressed the lip of a teacup to her mouth and forgot to drink. Evidence, the detective said. Give us evidence, not stories. The city shrugged. Evidence is shy, but it appears when it wants. A shoe by the waterline at Case das Colunas, wrong size. A red scarf snagged on a rusted nail near the ferry terminal, not hers. A notebook left at the cafe with a margin doodle of a hand pointing to a star, hers. A single hair on a tiled stairwell behind a locked gate nobody used, maybe hers. The lab work stalled between budgets and broken machines and the slow grind of 1990s bureaucracy. Years learn to pass. Posters fade from white to tea stain. The photo of the girl leaches color until only the eyes stay bright. Someone says the police lost the hair. Someone else says the chain of custody is a chain as strong as a whisper. A rumor grew legs. The longshoreman with the tattoo, the mechanic with the boat, the student with the cause, the priest with the keys, none of them fit the doorway like a key that turns. A phone call reached the tip line on a storm night in 1999. A voice, male, soft, like someone speaking in a church when the last candle is a dot. Look under the viaduct, the voice said. Then nothing. They looked. They found wrappers, beer bottles, a broken umbrella, a cassette tape with the ribbon torn out like intestines. They wound it back with a pencil, careful, like mending a vein. The tape did not play. Even ghosts have a failure rate. The case went cold the way coffee goes cold, slowly, without drama. One day you notice the steam is gone. The detectives said they were not giving up. The files were boxed, numbered, moved, stacked. The mother moved her chair to a different window as if the angle might change the outcome. Another city might have forgotten. Lisbon did not. The trams still sang. The river still reflected every lie. Inés became shorthand for the bad thing that could happen on an ordinary night when your keys are in your right pocket and you checked twice and still never made it home. Time skipped. News learned new names to shout, yet the old ones did not leave. Cold case people said on anniversaries. 20 years, 25, 30. A podcast later in the 2020s. A journalist with a voice like velvet and a habit of asking the question, then letting silence gnaw the rest. What did we miss? He asked the city. Episodes dropped on Sundays. Quiet streets bloomed with argument. A woman wrote in saying she saw a man with a limp on Rua do Alecrim that night. A cyclist said he heard two voices, urgent, then one voice alone. The police dusted off the boxes. A new team pulled the string that had waited under dust. They cataloged. They scanned. They tasted the old air sealed in brown folders. A lab in Porto said they could do more with less now. DNA from a hair that had been nearly thrown out in 1995 could speak in 2024. Science is a calendar that runs on its own time. The lab asked for patience. The city gave it, but only the brittle kind. There is a way the public turns toward a case like plants turning toward a window. You can feel it. You can measure it. The mother had not moved the chair again. She held the cassette tape the detectives had given back long ago because it did not matter then. It mattered now, because everything might matter. She ran her thumb along the plastic like a prayer bead. If sound is captured and sealed, does the past ever stop happening? Then one afternoon, the push alert. Phones buzzed on tables like trapped flies. Lisbon 1993 cold case solved. Arrest shocks community. Words made of brick. Words that promise an ending, even if the road is crooked. The camera trucks swarmed. Reporters lined the police steps. A spokesperson adjusted the microphone. Then the words came, clipped, blue, official. A suspect in custody. Male, 53. Worked on the ferry line in the 90s. Lived in Almada then. Cascais now. Criminal record minor. The lab found a partial DNA match from a cigarette butt recovered under the viaduct in 1999 and stored in a mislabeled envelope. The tape had a hum. The hum carried a fingerprint of the room where it had been recorded. The room matched a maintenance locker measured in a photo from 1994. A coincidence stack. A tower of small stones. A name, Lt.Joe. People Googled. News built him from scraps. A photo of a man at a barbecue, half turned away, face lit by a lighter. Friends said he was quiet. Neighbors said he was nice. The internet is good at deciding who you were in 5 minutes. He worked with boats. He knew currents. He knew when the last ferry ran. He knew which gate keys were kept on nails and which were kept in pockets. The police said they had reason to believe. They said thank you to the public. They said the family had been informed. They said justice, as if summoning something by name could make it walk through the door. Lisbon felt the tremor. Relief cracked into suspicion in the same breath. Solved, the banner screamed. But people who have lived with an open wound learn to keep the bandage on a few days more. A solved case should tidy the edges. This one did not. The cigarette butt had no chain of custody photograph. The locker room in the ferry building had been renovated twice since 1994. The map of where the cameras were that year exists in a drawer somebody cannot find. Dinas said he did not know her. The lawyer said the DNA math could make saints into sinners. The mother watched the press conference without blinking. She had waited 3 decades. She could wait for the next sentence. The journalist with the velvet voice recorded a special episode. He stood by the river while gulls wrote their vicious letters on the air. "We wanted an ending," he said. "Not accusing, not kind, just factual." Lisbon, 1993, cold case solved. The words snap into place like a lock, but locks do not tell you what is behind the door. Locks do not tell you who lost the key. Listeners messaged in with relief emojis, with celebration, with rage. Someone wrote that they had worked with Dinas in 2003 and he was always early and drank his coffee black. Another wrote that he talked to himself. Both things can be true. That is the trouble with people. They hold multitudes and alibis. The detectives put on fresh jackets and went back to old places. The alley where the azulejo is bitten still bites. They knocked on the mechanic's door. They counted steps from the bar to the square. They timed the tram. They stood by the viaduct at 2217 and listened to the highway's iron rain. They cataloged again what had been cataloged for the performance of certainty. A new intern found an index card coded wrong. On it, a note about a call in May 1994. The caller said he heard a girl crying in the ferry locker room weeks after the disappearance. He thought it was a stray cat. He did not check. He moved to Lyon in 1996. He died in 2011. The note had no follow-up. The past is full of doors we forgot to open. At night, the city tries to sleep. Radios murmur in kitchens. Shoes rest by doors like obedient dogs. The mother sets the cassette in her tape player, the old silver one with the bent antenna. She presses play. The sound is a room, big, empty, with a ceiling fan. A distant clang, a ferry's belly laughing to itself. Then a hum that could be a fluorescent light or someone humming without knowing it. Then a breath that could be wind or a person choosing not to speak. She closes her eyes. She hears her daughter in every soft scrape. That is the brain's oldest trick, the kind that keeps us alive or keeps us haunted. The headline remains on websites. Solved. The word looks small now. The case feels larger, not smaller, as if an answer added volume. The court will weigh the math and the memory. A prosecutor will speak of proximity and access, of opportunity, of the way one wrong night can point at the same face across 30 years. A defense will speak of contaminated envelopes, of renovations, of false certainty in sterile rooms under bright lights. Lisbon will watch. Some will say it is done already. Others will trace the route from the bar to the river on their palms and shake their heads, because in their bones the geometry says no. There is a white mark on the tile where a piece once fit. It is the kind of thing you only notice if you stop long enough to let the city breathe against you. Stand in front of it at dusk and you can see the missing shard like a ghost tooth. Maybe Inez sketched it once. Maybe she planned to fix it in a drawing where everything had edges, weights, and a promise that beams carry loads forever. In the real city, loads shift, beams groan, people fall through. The case solved sits like a heavy statue in a square. Pigeons learn to use it as a landmark. Children run past it without reading the plaque. And still, at certain hours, you can hear a voice from a tape warning you that conclusions are just another kind of mystery with better lighting. On the hill above Alfama, a woman sweeps her steps. The bristles whisper across stone that remembers emperors, earthquakes, fatigue. She looks up when a siren splits the day. Another siren, another story. She has learned to keep a bowl of water by the door for stray cats and stray truths. People pass, their phones glowing, their thumbs restless, their news alive. Cold case, they say, half in awe, half in habit. Solved. The word goes up into the warm air and hangs there, not falling, not rising, like a paper lantern over the river that somehow does not catch fire. Morning folds open over the river with the color of old silver. The ferry horns clear their throats. Reporters cluster like gulls on the courthouse steps, microphones lifted as if that gesture could catch truth by the tail. Inside, a man walks between two officers, chin angled down, eyes flat like coins. His name is on every tongue, but he does not taste it. He stares at the floor tiles, at the tiny constellations of chips and scuffs sailors' boots have left over decades. His hands are cuffed, wrists marked with half moons, where the metal has thought about skin. He is the current the story has chosen to ride, for now. The room smells like paper, disinfectant, a hint of rain in the wool coats. Someone coughs. Someone's pen scratches a date. Lisbon waits to be told what it has felt for years and refused to say aloud. Start with a boy, South Bank. A father with a net and a superstition about Thursdays, a mother who kept vinegar in a jar under the sink for cleaning fish smell out of the floor. The boy learned the river's grammar before he learned to write, learned to read the seam where wind makes water shiver, learned the time between the ripple and the slap against stone. He grew and quit school early and took a job where the river is the hallway between rooms. Ferries. Morning shift at first, then nights because nights pay. Nights because nights are quiet. Quiet has a salary. He took keys on a ring that bit the thigh when he walked. He knew where the spare fuses were. He knew which machine to kick and how hard. He was useful. Men who are useful become furniture in a place. Nobody notices furniture except when it moves. Start with a girl. North Bank. A room that smells like pencils and coffee. A window that frames a slice of sky like a postage stamp no one will ever mail. A habit of leaving with a book every time she left, not because she would read it, but because the weight of words in a bag is lucky. She liked the seconds after a tram has passed, when the world seems briefly emptied of noise, when silence wears a warm coat. She liked the way light caught on tiles and made them look wet even when they were dry. She had a mother who said, "Text me," long before texting, by which she meant call, by which she meant let me know the narrative has not snapped. The case file is a cartography of maybe. The cigarette butt, catalogued in 1999, has spent more years in the dark than some of the officers handling it have been alive. A technician in a white coat lifts it like a glass sliver from a cathedral floor. Partial pattern, the report says. Enough for a door to open a crack. Not enough to step through with a crown. Science can be arrogant or humble depending on the day. Today it is precise and cautious, and still the world hears trumpets. The maintenance locker's acoustics enter the story through a back door only a particular kind of obsessive would find. The tape hum sits at 50 hertz, a line hum, a signature with teeth marks. Old fluorescent tubes growl at that frequency. The ferry building used them in that wing until a procurement change in 1996. A photograph in a newsletter shows a row of lockers with a calendar of fado nights pinned crooked, a plastic fan on a stool, the kind that makes air feel like a dog panting on your neck. Does a hum convict? No, but it points. The detectives walk the route again. They treat the city like a diorama where you can place figures and make them move by thinking. She leaves the bar at 22:17. She declines a second beer with a small wave. He checks a pump that is not broken because that is what you do on nights when minutes have long legs. She passes the square where a man sells lighters that look like grenades because fire likes a disguise. He takes the corridor with the blue door because it is the fastest path to the service dock. She hears the river like a low song. He hears the river like an order. The last ferry runs at 22:30. The timetable breathes like a lung. In a corner booth of the city, memory throws a switch. Did their paths cross? Maybe. The geometry is cruel. Lines intersect. But someone says he had a limp that year. Another says the limp came later, after the scaffolding fall in 1996. Witnesses' calendars are stitched with rumors. A nurse remembers a scar above his knee, thick as rope. A mechanic remembers nothing but the taste of coffee and oil. The river remembers everything and tells no one. The journalist with the velvet voice meets the mother under an awning while Rain writes Morse code on the sidewalk. He asks if he may record. She nods as if he is asked to borrow a chair. He sets the mic down like a saucer. She speaks softly because grief ages the voice. Solved, she says, trying the word on as if it were a coat she might return. Solved is a door without a view. The journalist says nothing. He lets the hum of the cafe settle around her words like foam. Later, he will strain the audio and hear a spoon clink against porcelain at exactly the moment she says the girl's name. The city will hear that and decide the sound is fate knocking. In Almada, a neighbor leans against a railing and smokes a cigarette down to the crown. He has lived next to the suspect 8 years. He says the man waters his plants at night. He says the man keeps the garbage area neat. He says he does not like football, which is suspicious in a place where clubs are passed down like heirlooms. He says he talks to his radio. He says nothing that helps and everything that builds the scaffolding of character around the accusation we might hang on it. Online, strangers pick teams within minutes. One team writes monster, the other writes scapegoat. Between those words is a silence that could heal a wound or widen it. In a basement room at headquarters, an intern with eyes the color of new coins reads index cards that smell like cardboard and dust. She locates one thin as a secret, filed between 2 thicker stories. A call logged in May 1994 from a night watchman at the ferry building. reporting a sound like crying in the locker corridor. The note says the caller later decided it was a cat. The note ends there. She blows dust at it as if dust were an accusation. She brings it to her supervisor with both hands the way you bring a lit candle. The supervisor sighs the sigh of a man who has watched cases bruise and heal and bruise again. He says good work and means it. He says we will find the watchman. The watchman lives now in a city far away, suddenly ready to be called Leon or Cadiz, but he died in 2011. The team finds the man's sister. She keeps a shoebox of photographs and 2 letters he sent home that year. One letter mentions a leak in the ceiling, a draft that made a constant low sound. He writes the way bored men write, like a man measuring a room with his feet. There is a Polaroid of the locker corridor. On the far locker door, a sticker of a fado singer, mouth open, eyes closed, a line of musical notes marching off the edge. The sticker is not evidence. It is a mood. But moods matter. Prosecutors are trained to turn mood into motive. They are architects of stories with load-bearing beams. In a press room, they discuss trajectories, access, the intimate knowledge of closing times. A path is sketched. A theory is placed on the table like bread, and the public is invited to tear pieces. Defense is trained to knock on beams and listen for hollows. Chain of custody, they say. Renovations, they say. Probability is not destiny. Someone at the back mentions transferred DNA, a term the city will Google before sleep. In the courthouse corridor, the man stands with his head still down, listening without looking. He says nothing. When asked if he knows the girl, he says he does not. He says he did his job. He says he went home. The words have the weight of pebbles. How many pebbles make a dam? Somewhere a barista has written, solved in foam on a cappuccino as a joke, and then wiped it away with the back of a spoon, embarrassed at his own hands. Somewhere a tourist asks what the cameras are doing by the ferry building, and a taxi driver tells the long story in the short way. Somewhere a teacher holds up the day's paper and tells teenagers the city is a classroom and a courtroom and a church, and every voice inside it is accused of something, if only of wanting an ending too much. In the mother's apartment, the tape waits by the machine like a dog at the door. She watches the news with the sound low, reading lips, trusting faces less than silences. She eats a piece of toast, standing up. She has learned not to sit for long while the city decides. Furniture begins to feel like a trap if you wait on it. The detectives return to the locker corridor with a warrant and a toolbox packed with careful hands. The air is brighter now, cleaner, a public-facing cleanliness that smells like the present tense. They measure, they photograph, they knock with knuckles, and then with a rubber mallet. Behind one locker, a panel gives with the small sigh of a secret relieved to be found. Behind the panel, dust like the skin of years peels away at a touch. A coin, a washer, a button, brass, with a particular threading. Bag it. Log it. A brand logo on the inward face so small you need the macro lens to see it. The brand sold coats in the winter of 1992-93 at 2 shops within a tram ride of the girl's street. That proves nothing. That proves something. The city holds both statements in its mouth and swallows hard. The journalist goes to the shop that does not exist anymore. It is a pharmacy now. White light and clean counters and no memory of racks of coats. He finds the owner in a village outside the city. The owner has a ledger in a drawer, blue cover, bent corner. He used to write good customers' names because that used to be how you remembered when the card machine died. The ledger shows a purchase of a dark coat size small paid in cash on March 2nd, 1993. No name. A square where a name could have been. The owner says he remembers the faces that talked. He does not remember the faces that walked with their eyes on the door. He apologizes as if forgetting were a crime. Back in the lab, a specialist listens to the tape again with software that can extract whispers from storms. He sets the waveforms against themselves, flips the phase, kisses the noise away. A shape emerges that could be the human machine saying a word, 2 syllables. The room goes still. Inés. Or now. The 2 words wear the same coat if you squint. The specialist does not declare. He prints a spectrogram that looks like winter trees and writes a note with careful language. Courts prefer careful language until they do not. We pretend we do not crave spectacle. Then we give it a parking permit. The first hearing arrives with cameras like flowers on a hospital bed. The man walks in darker clothes, pressed, buttons holding. His lawyer speaks in a tone designed to calm dogs. The prosecutor replies in a tempo designed to keep stamina up during a long race. The judge looks like a person who has read 5,000 sad stories and has 3,000 more to go. In the back row, a young woman who was a child when the girl went missing holds a phone low and texts her mother every 15 minutes with updates because the city tells its stories to itself, constantly, as if to keep the lights on. Rain returns. Lisbon in rain is a different city. Tires write cursive in crosswalks. Tiles weep their own blue. The river fattens. The ferries plod like patient horses. Men in orange vests shake water from their shoulders and keep walking. The locker corridor smells like lemon cleaner and history. On a high shelf above the newly opened panel, the team finds a coil of cable tie-ins, yellowed, brittle, useless now except as chronology. Someone writes the word incidental. Someone else writes the word suggestive. The words fight and then lie down on the same page. A postcard falls from behind a beam, face down. Turned over, it shows a cartoon of two sailors playing cards. On the back, a single sentence in block letters. We all think we hear what we need. No signature, no date, a joke, or a testimony, or a boardman's graffiti. The city takes it and tucks it into the pocket where it keeps its uncanny. At dusk, the mother presses play again. The fan hum, the room, the breath, the almost word. She doesn't need the specialist to tell her what she hears. Mothers have their own spectrum analyzers woven into the bones below the collar. She hears the syllables as a door half open and half shut. She hears the shape of the river, which has always been a mouth. She hears herself 30 years younger call upstairs that dinner is getting cold. She hears a door close. She presses stop and sits in the quiet the machine leaves behind, which is louder than the hum ever was, which is a testimony to the noise grief makes when you try to put it away. Outside, a siren licks the sky. A tram rings. A child drops a marble and it goes skipping down a slope into a drain where it will join a family of lost things. Under a bridge, a man in a jacket with a missing brass button lights a cigarette without registering the parallel. He blows smoke that is not a message and becomes one anyway, because a city mid-story makes symbols out of ordinary breath. Cold case, someone says on a corner, and someone else answers solved, as if speaking the word often enough could pack mortar into the cracks the years have carved. The word hangs in the damp air, a headline written with steam on a cafe window. It will vanish when a hand wipes the glass, and still, for a moment, it is there, legible, framed by the river that flows past without slowing, because rivers do not wait for verdicts, and cities only pretend they do. Morning becomes rumor before the sun is high, headlines flapping from kiosks like startled birds. Lisbon, 1993, cold case solved, repeated in black ink until it feels like a chant, until it risks becoming a lullaby, until people say it with the same tone they use to order bread. The suspect sits in a beige room with a window too high to see the river and answers the same questions arranged in different orders, an exam he didn't study for because nobody does. He says he was on duty that week. He says he fixed a pump. He says he does not remember the girl. He says the locker corridor is a corridor, and his hands remember keys, the way a mouth remembers a song. Every answer is a coin. The officers tap each coin on the table, listening for counterfeit, listening for confession hiding under nickel. Across the water, old men sip bika and trade theories like stamps, the mechanic with the boat, the priest with the keys, the neighbor with the gentle dog who never barks. There is a comfort in naming suspects. It makes the dark feel organized. The journalist with the velvet voice records in a stairwell to catch the echo of stone, talking softly into the microphone about a term the city has learned overnight, transferred DNA. He does not define it. He lets the words hang, deliberate, a cloud waiting to rain over a courtroom. In the lab, the technician wears gloves the color of hospital light and slides the old cigarette paper into a modern mouth of a machine that hums its own stubborn hymn. Numbers appear like constellations nobody has named yet. The report grows one paragraph longer. Caution laces every sentence like wire. Caution can cut. Caution can hold. The detectives work maps until the maps begin to work them. Red pins mark a perimeter of maybe. The bar at 2217. The viaduct where a tipster whispered and the wind ate the rest. The maintenance locker with a hum recorded onto a cassette like a ghost that learned to speak electricity. The panel in the wall and the brass button, heretofore meaningless metal, suddenly given a role and a wardrobe. A brand logo under the patina like a whisper under paint. A ledger from a shop that is now a pharmacy with white light and no memory of wool. A square where a name could have been. The detectives point with capped pens. Nobody wants to bleed blue on the page. A senior officer taps the timetable of the ferries for April 1993, the last crossing that night, 22:30. He asks the room to stand in it, to hear it, to smell the ropes wet with river, to see the shape of a girl and the shape of a man crossing angles in a city where angles are old and stone and slippery. The suspect's lawyer files a motion like a blade slipped under a door. Suppress, the paper says. Preserve the purity of proceedings. Question the envelope with the cigarette butt, the hand that handled it, the shelf where it slept, the label that wandered off an edge and took a decade with it. The judge reads and underlines and does not move her face. She has learned economy. The city, which has learned drama, supplies that portion. Talk shows stage their trial before the trial, with graphics that put the suspect's face beside the river, his name in a font usually saved for champions and disasters. Viewers eat dinner with the television lit like a shrine and decide, because decisions make the fork travel more easily from plate to mouth. Some say monster, some say scapegoat. A small proportion says both and then cannot sleep. The mother leaves her apartment for the first time in days and walks to the square where streetcar tracks cross like stitches. She does not want to be photographed, but she cannot bear the walls. A woman buying flowers recognizes her and does not know how to look, switches from pity to apology mid-sentence. The mother nods, because strangers have paid tithes to this grief for years, and she has heard every currency of sorrow. She returns home with white carnations and sets them in a jar that once held peaches. The cassette sits beside the player in a rectangle of sun, as if the machine were a lizard soaking heat. She almost presses play. She doesn't. Memory has to be rationed like rain in a dry month. A ferry veteran, retired now with a back like a bent nail, agrees to meet the journalist by the railing at Kaisto Sodre. He wears a cap with salt embroidered into the band. He says nights blur. He says the suspect was quiet and the quiet men keep the lights working when you want your city to pretend the dark is optional. He says once in 1992, the suspect guided a drunk musician down the ramp with a patience that would make saints nod. He says once in 1994, the same man shouted at a boy who jumped the gate, a shout that had a nasty hook on it. He shrugs. He does not know which story scales heavier. The journalist thanks him and keeps the recorder running while gulls shout verdicts in a language nobody tries to translate. In the basement, the intern finds a stack of maintenance logs with a coffee ring galaxy on the first page. April 10th, 1993. Entry about a flickering lamp in the locker corridor, repaired at 2305 by initials DA. The time is wrong for a man who claims he went home at 2245, or the clock was wrong, or the hand that wrote the numbers had done 3 shifts too many, or logs were filled in later to satisfy a supervisor's love of rectangles containing ink. The supervisor from then speaks over a video call that hacks and freezes like a river in a cheap winter. He says they sometimes did the paperwork next day. He says he does not remember the night. He might remember the smell of lemon cleaner. He might be remembering a different night. Memory is a forger with a steady hand. A new test yields a line on paper that a prosecutor can point at and a defense can hit with a hammer. The cigarette butt shows a partial in a family that includes the suspect, a cousin, a brother, a son. The family tree sprouts more branches than the courtroom has chairs. The defense hires a scientist who wears bow ties to say that partials are gamblers. The prosecution hires a scientist who does not wear bow ties to say that gamblers sometimes win, and that is why cards are counted. The judge listens and writes and keeps her face as hushed as a library. The city, which does not own such a face, wears whatever feeling is loudest that hour. On a bus, a woman watches a video of the hearing on her phone and misses her stop and does not mind. The detectives return to the bar where the girl said no to the second beer with a small wave. They stand at the door and let their eyes adjust to the ghosts of laughter layered on the air. The bartender from then died 5 years ago, but his daughter works the taps now and remembers him telling the story of the girl with the neat hair who always folded her napkin before she left. The detectives ask stupid questions on purpose because sometimes the city forgives stupidity with truth. Did he ever mention a man with a limp? She says people limp when they are tired. She says the floor slopes. She says life is a limp if you watch long enough. One detective writes that down in the margin of a page he will never turn in. At the ferry building, they open more walls. Behind paint, paint. Behind that, a message scrawled in black marker. Sunday is always louder. It is not a clue. It is an opinion left by a bored man with a black marker. It becomes a clue anyway, because a city in the middle of a narrative grants sainthood to graffiti and omens to pigeons. A key is found under a strip of molding, thin, with a notch pattern like a wave. It fits nothing in the present building. It may have fit everything in the old one. They bag it and tag it, and they do not write hope on the card, even if that is what they feel. The neighbor in Almada remembers a night a year ago when the suspect stood in his doorway long after midnight looking at the river as if the water were speaking Morse. The neighbor went to the bathroom and returned, and the man had not moved. He tells this to a camera, and the city decides it is either evidence of a haunted conscience or the normal posture of a man who has lived with tides. Two interpretations stand shoulder to shoulder. They do not fight. They just look in different directions. The journalist visits the mother again and brings pastes still warm enough to steam the paper. They talk about small things because small things are safe. Then he asks if she has listened to the tape again. She says yes. She says she will not say what she hears because if she says it aloud, it becomes part of the evidence, and evidence is a meat grinder. The journalist nods. The microphone catches the sound of a plate meeting wood. The city hears it later and decides it is the sound of a gavel or a door or a heart. Court date set. The headline scrolls over the evening news like a tide schedule. People mark calendars as if they are going to a festival, a funeral, a football match. The prosecutor practices sentences that run fast without tripping. The defense counts breaths between syllables. The suspect sleeps badly under a polyester blanket that smells like other men's nights. He dreams of a locker room where the hum is a voice and the voice is a hum, and he wakes with his hands in fists he does not remember making. He counts backward from 100 and forgets where he meant to land. The detectives walk the route one last time before the court makes the route into a story with fixed points. They stand at the azulejo wall with the bite missing and imagine the girl's shadow passing, light as paper. They stand at the square where the man sells lighters like grenades and imagine him packing up. They stand at the ramp to the ferry and imagine a decision that was not a decision, a drift that became a direction. They are not poets. They are paid to deliver bones to rooms with microphones. Still, the city infects everyone with metaphor when it wants to. A late rain drills the streets as if making holes for seeds. Tram bells ring like warnings disguised as lullabies. The mother presses play and lets the tape run until the end where the leader flaps in the machine with a sound like a small bird trapped in a skylight. She rewinds and does it again. She tells no one. The journalist reads messages from strangers who swear they saw the girl in a market in Faro in 1997, on a ferry in Greece in 2001, on a street in Sao Paulo last winter. He files them in a folder named with a word that means ache in 3 languages. He sleeps with one headphone in and wakes to the sea in a white noise app pretending to be the Tagus. The city binds itself for the performance. Barricades, schedules, security that looks like a staged photograph of security. A reporter practicing her live shot under an umbrella that pops inside out and makes her swear and laugh. The courthouse is an arc in a flood of eyes. People line the steps with coffees like candles. They are not cruel. They are part of the chorus. A cold case wants witnesses even for the act of breathing. Down in evidence, a clerk finds a plastic bag with a smear of adhesive that holds 3 fibers the thickness of patience. Under a microscope, they whisper the color of a dark coat circa 1992 or 1996. Or the kind of cheap wool that sheds the same way for a decade. The brand is generic, the fibers are everyone's. The clerk writes incidental and then crosses it out and writes retained. He is not trained for poetry. He is doing his best not to erase anything that might one day stand up and say I was here. The suspect's son visits the facility and sits, hands on knees, with a face made of his father's edges and his mother's softness. He speaks to no camera. He speaks to a counselor whose job is to keep people from confusing their own pulse with the city's drum. He says he grew up on the river's edge and learned to tell time by the way the light breaks on chop. He says his father taught him to coil rope neat. He says he does not know what he thinks. He says that sentence 4 times and each version weighs differently. In the evening, when the sky bruises itself purple over the water, 2 teenagers practice skateboard tricks on the plaza, and one lands a clean kickflip and yells a word that would be censored on television. A tourist claps without knowing why. A tram hums like the tape. The locker corridor is empty and lemon clean, and the new fluorescent lights hum at a different pitch, progress tuning the city's song without asking. Somewhere behind a wall, a lost key sleeps forever. Somewhere on a shelf, a ledger ages toward dust. Somewhere a headline holds the word solved like a lantern, and the city walks by its light, careful, dazzled, not sure whether the glow leads to a door or back to the same square where rumors gather like pigeons and lift as one when a siren cuts the air. The day the hearings begin, the sky wears courtroom gray, and the river plays bailiff with a steady shush that asks everyone to stand. Cameras bloom on the steps, black flowers with red lights at their throats. Umbrellas bump like slow arguments. The announcers rehearse the headline until it tastes like chalk. Lisbon, 1993, cold case solved, repeat, again, louder. Inside, the air carries paper dust and old varnish and the faint citrus of somebody's cologne trying to make order out of nerves. The suspect sits behind glass the color of pond water, a square that turns people into silhouettes. He looks briefly toward the gallery and then away as if eye contact might be another chain he cannot pick. His lawyer arranges pens by height. The prosecutor flips tabs that look like a parade of thin flags. The judge enters and the room recalibrates itself around a single pair of eyes. Chain of custody becomes the first drum. Evidentiary purity, the cigarette butt, the envelope, the shelf, the box, the mislabel that went on holiday and took half a decade with it. The prosecution offers a map of the butt's life. Found under the viaduct in 1999, bagged, logged, moved during the renovation, discovered in 2007 behind a file marked minor thefts, relogged with an apology note in a margin like a bandage nobody sees. The defense traces the same map with a red pen and draws skulls at every detour. Transfer DNA, they say, like a spell that makes fingerprints float from person to person on an indoor breeze. The scientist with the calm voice and the jacket with elbows darker from years at benches says yes, transfer exists, but probability wears shoes and walks specific streets. The judge listens with the face of a statue that has heard both prayer and profanity and knows they can sound alike if you shut your eyes. Outside, the river leans against stone with a tired shoulder. A tied mathematician from the naval school arrives in a jacket that looks borrowed and tells a detective on a bench that at 22:30 on April 10, 1993, the current ran east at half a meter per second, give or take a sympathy. He draws arrows on a napkin, shows back eddies like questions curling against answers, shows how something dropped from the service dock would drift, hook, whisper along pilings, snag or not snag, depending on 1,000 petty decisions water makes. The detective nods and pockets the napkin because sometimes the smallest map is the one that tells the truth. No body was recovered. The mathematician does not promise ghosts. He only points at math and says the river keeps its own ledger. A retired union man in a coat with missing thread at the cuff speaks on a late-night show that smells like old coffee and new outrage and says there was a strike threat in '93, a shuffle of shifts, a weekend where everyone did everyone else's hours, where names hopped the timetable like fleas. Records don't love chaos. Chaos doesn't love records. The defense smiles into their sleeves. The prosecution says the maintenance log with the coffee ring galaxy still wears a date like a badge, 2305, initials DA. The supervisor from that year stares from a video square and says maybe tomorrow's ink sometimes stood in for today's work. The judge writes notes in an alphabet. Only she reads and underlines a word twice, maybe. The journalist with the velvet voice walks with the mother along a row of trees whose leaves have learned the choreography of early autumn, the light slanting, the pavement a chessboard of damp and dry. He does not record yet. They talk about the taste of oranges in winter, about bus routes disappearing, about the way shoes sound different on the old calzada than on the new poured stuff. He asks for words she can give the city. She says the city already speaks without a mouth. She says the headline solves a thing the nights have not. He asks about the tape. She says she listens less now. She says every sound turns into her daughter if she's not careful. A cupboard closing, a tram bell, the tiny sigh a book makes when you set it down. Grief is a good forger, she says, and smiles because the line sounds like it belongs to someone who writes for a living and she does not. A new photo enters the story with fanfare, a yellowed square with sprocket holes, a tourist's shot from Rua de Bisa on a night close to the night. A girl in the foreground wearing a jacket the color of wet slate. Behind her, blurred, a man in a work coat turning away, a keyring flashing sun like a fish. The internet baptizes it meaning. Commenters circle the keyring, the posture, the angle of the man's ear. The paper prints it like a sacrament. The detectives run it through software that can make pixels confess more than they know, and it confesses nothing except motion and time. The tourist, now 60, living in a town with no river, remembers the shot as the one where the tram driver waved at his fiancée. He does not remember the girl. He does not remember the man. The city wants to adopt the photo anyway, wants to place it above the mantle with the other ghosts. In the locker corridor, a sound engineer hired by the state arrives with a satchel of devices like a magician who knows he is only a man with wire. He measures the current hum, new lights, new ballast, new pitch. He feeds the old cassette into a machine that drinks hiss and coughs up spectrograms like winter forests. He speaks of 50 hertz and harmonics, of how a room adds its voice to your voice, of resonance at 120 hertz that suggests a space long and narrow with hard surfaces and a ceiling under 3 meters. The Ferry Building in 1993 had such a corridor, so did 100 other rooms in the city. He will not swear on any saint's bones. He will say the tape and the old corridor could be siblings. He will say siblings share features. The judge writes a word with a small flourish, could. In Almada, a neighbor tells a reporter about a winter in the early 2000s when he saw the suspect carry a coat to the communal bin and then come back empty-handed with his jaw set like a secret. The neighbor had thought nothing because coats molt. Now he thinks everything. A tailor on a side street with chalk on his fingers looks at the brass button through a loop and says the threading is particular to 2 factories that imported cheap hardware in 92-94. He writes the names and the addresses in careful block letters, pleased to matter, the way people are pleased when their days turn out to be footnotes to a myth. The detectives follow both threads to warehouses that are now co-working spaces with fruit water and glass dispensers and plants that look like haircuts. The ledgers are gone. The walls have forgotten. The court denies suppression on the cigarette butt, but builds a fence of cautions around it, words that slow the prosecutor's jog into a measured walk. The defense wins a small victory on a chain of custody photo that went missing after the renovation. The city learns to live inside a scale, weights added and taken until equilibrium feels like tension, not peace. Talk shows pivot to graphics of scales, solar systems of icons circling a silhouette labeled suspect. An anchor uses the word watershed and then laughs at the accidental river. The intern returns to the stack of maintenance memos, learns the catalog numbers like nursery rhymes, finds one more page that should have been stapled to the coffee ring galaxy. Ballast failure, B corridor 2255. Complaint logged by initials ID, not DA, not the suspect. Another set of letters to add to the alphabet soup. The intern prints it and runs, sneakers whispering on tile. The supervisor frowns 3 times in a single second. Who is ID? A name from a roster that went to the sea during the second renovation. A man who transferred in 94 to a building on the hill and retired in 10 and died in 19. His daughter keeps a red folder labeled PAI in a drawer of recipes and receipts. The folder contains a badge, a Polaroid of lockers, and a shopping list where milk sits beside bolts. On the back of the Polaroid, a note in block letters. Fan whines like cat, replace soon. The date is April 9th, 1993, the day before. The city inhales through its teeth. An anonymous envelope finds the journalist's mailbox. A second tape. Not a copy. A different creature, smaller, recorded on a microcassette like the kind doctors used for dictation in the time before phones swallowed everything. The letter inside is a single line. Corridor B, 1994. He listens. Hiss, hum, a metallic mouth clicking on and off, and then faint. A melody like someone humming absent-mindedly between verses they haven't written yet. No words. Just the throat trying to remember what it knows. He calls the police. He turns the tape over like a coin. Side B is blank except for the sound of the machine itself, the motor a low animal. The engineer listens and says the hum is kin to the first tape. The defense says the tapes are children of suggestion, adopted by a hungry narrative. The judge says nothing, because judges are trained to keep a mouth for sentences only after evidence learns to speak. The suspect's alibi acquires seasoning. A kiosk owner says the man sometimes watched football there, stood at the corner because that's where the radio caught a clean signal. Which match? April 10th, 1993, late. Benfica played earlier. The late broadcast was a foreign match scribbled into the schedule like an afterthought. The kiosk owner cannot swear to that specific night. He can only swear to habit. Habits can be anchors. Habits can also be masks. The prosecutor says the maintenance log with 2305 refuses to drink with the kiosk tail. The defense says pens lie and clocks flatter themselves. The judge draws a box around the time and leaves it uncolored. The journalist's episode drops on Sunday. He stands on a quiet quay, lets the gulls annotate his pauses, speaks into the wind that steals every third word and gives it back. He tells the story of hums and ballasts, of buttons and ledgers, of scaffolding falls that may or may not have birthed limps, of napkins with arrows where currents choose. He says the word solved once and then refuses to repeat it. He says open wound 3 times because repetition is the only honest rhetoric some days. Comments pour like rain under a tin roof. A woman writes that she worked the ticket booth in 93 and remembers the suspect always buying coffee at 2240. Another writes that he never carried change and always smiled. Another writes that he made her uneasy. Uneasy as a weather, not a map. Night lands soft as ash. The courthouse empties. A janitor pushes a yellow bucket across a floor like a slow ship. The suspect returns to his narrow bed and lies on his back and stares at a ceiling with 3 tiny stains, shaped like a constellation nobody has named. He counts his breaths and then counts fewer until counting stops being math and becomes tide. In the mother's apartment, the tape rests. She does not touch it tonight. She opens the window instead and lets the city's own soundtrack fill the room. Tires on wet stone, a door shutting, laughter turning a corner, a cat declaring innocence in the courtyard. She speaks her daughter's name into the air as if air were court recorded. At the ferry building, they pry one more panel where a line of paint bubbles suggests secrets have lungs. Behind it, a recess the size of a shoebox. Inside, silt like the dust of drowned years. A scrap of plastic with the ghost of adhesive, the memory of a sticker removed in a careful hurry, leaving a pale rectangle like a negative of a saint. A coin, another washer. Nothing that sings its name. A memo half-eaten by damp. Keys must not leave the premises. Underneath, a signature nobody can read. They bag what can be bagged and leave the hole open to air. Secrets want sun sometimes. By the river, 2 students film on their phones. The frame a rectangle of night and light. They make a joke about ghosts clocking in for the late shift. A ferry moans. The bridge walks its own red spine across the water. The word solved flickers on screens and in conversations like a neon sign with a tired transformer. It works, then stutters, then returns. People keep walking under it because that is what people do. Headlines are weather. Weather changes and still we go for bread. The judge releases a schedule that reads like a liturgy. Evidentiary motions, expert testimony, lay witnesses, final arguments. The city copies the dates into calendars as if writing them could make time behave. The prosecutor goes home and lines up note cards on a kitchen table that has known other battles: taxes, divorce, a child's homework that refused to be convinced. The defense irons a tie and rehearses how to make a jury hear uncertainty, not as cowardice, but as courage. The detectives check shoelaces and say nothing because their work is to carry boxes through doors and then wait in hallways while stories put on uniforms. Midnight leans in. The hum most people hear is the refrigerator, the fan, the last bus. A few hear something else, a pitch their bones learned 30 years ago. Corridor B. A voice almost saying a word, Inés, now, both, neither. The city, which has always been a choir of contradictory certainties, sings under its breath. Cold case, it says, soft, the syllables like the click of keys on a ring in a pocket under a coat that may have lost a button under a ferry building whose lights once whined at 50 hertz and now hum in a cleaner register that offends nobody and convinces nothing. The river keeps its counsel. The tiles hold their blue. The night makes room for another siren that isn't for this story and still sounds like it is. And tomorrow, cameras will bloom again, and umbrellas will argue, and someone will hold a sign that says justice as if the word were a door, and the city will walk toward it with all its weight, hoping the hinges remember how to move. The second week walks in with the gait of a man carrying a secret, slow, deliberate, refusing to hurry for anyone, the courthouse breathing like a creature that has learned the rhythm of cameras and clattering heels. The panels along the corridor reflecting faces that don't want to be reflected. The city adjusting its collar and leaning closer, hungry for the next sentence that might finally taste like certainty. The suspect is led in at the same time as yesterday and the day before, a ritual of steps and glances and the gentlest clink of metal, a sound that rearranges the blood of anyone who hears it too often. He looks thinner, or the glass looks thicker, hard to say. His lawyer nods as if to a metronome only he can hear. The prosecutor thumbs a blue tab, then a yellow, then lands on red as if declaring an alarm the room is already feeling. The judge arrives and the benches straighten their spines because the furniture has learned obedience in this building and people copy furniture without knowing. Expert day is a weather system. The sound engineer returns with cables coiled like tame snakes and a vocabulary that has turned into a plot line all its own. He speaks the language everyone now pretends they've always known. Hum and harmonic and bandwidth and resonance, a church made of numbers and echoes. He shows the spectrograms, winter trees, black trunks on gray snow, a low ridge at 50 hertz and its chatter of children, 100, 150, 200, like a choir taking harmony cues. He maps the cassette's ghost room against the old blueprints, points at Corridor B, at the cheap ballasts the city bought in bulk that year, at the way concrete traps sound and gives it back the way heartbreak gives back a name you tried to forget. Could, he repeats, never must, never is, could. The word behaves like a polite citizen. It obeys the rules while doing absolutely nothing to warm anyone's hands. A retired electrician from the ferry building takes the stand with a hat in his lap and a way of smoothing it with his palm that makes even strangers want to iron his life for him. He remembers lights that whined and fans that took offense at humidity, remembers swapping tubes and stealing time from lunch to make sure a corridor didn't sound like a complaint. He remembers a man who worked nights, quiet, careful, useful, the kind of useful that turns you into a coat on a peg, always where you should be, never the reason a supervisor frowns. He remembers Locker 12's latch sticking, remembers a key ring like a small comet at the man's hip, remembers a winter where everyone coughed the same cough, remembers nothing about April 10th, 1993 that would move a scale. The prosecutor tries to shape his answers into a staircase to climb. The defense tries to turn each word into a loose stone underfoot. The judge writes a third line of notes that a clerk will never decipher. The intern's memo with ID earns a day of work from a room that loves days like this. They build a life out of initials. They phone a daughter who pulls a red folder from a drawer between recipes for stew and the outline of a tax year that once made a man swear in a way that embarrassed him. The folder smells like paper should smell if you loved it. The badge is there, the Polaroid of the corridor with a fan whose blades shine like shy knives, the shopping list where milk sits beside bolts, and on the Polaroid's back, the note about the fan whining like a cat, dated the day before the girl disappeared. The prosecutor turns the date to the jury of eyes the room always becomes, says sequence, says proximity, says the corridor was a throat clearing for something the next night would have to hear. The defense says cats are everywhere, and so are fans, and so are notebooks, and so are men with block letters. The judge draws a small square around the date and lets it glow for nobody but herself. Outside, the river keeps its ledger without sharing the columns. 2 divers contracted for the city's never-ending maintenance tie ropes to their waists and drop into the gray like letters into a mailbox that never answers. There is a rumor about a search the public isn't supposed to know, and everyone knows within an hour because cities are sieve and amplifier at once. The journalist with the velvet voice watches from the rail without recording because some sounds belong to water and some belong to tape, and he's learned to tell the difference. The divers return with junk, blessed junk, grocery cart bones, a tangle of wire that looks like 2 spiders married badly, a bottle with a message that is only rainwater and ghosts of a label, and then a small tin with a lid that refuses, a candy tin someone's grandfather might have used to hide screws. The pry, the sigh, the hinge that remembers its manners, and inside a seal of silt and 3 coins and a sliver of enamel that could be a broken tooth or an earring or a lie. The tin is logged, sealed, carried with the ceremony junk sometimes earns when junk might wake up and say a name. A watch repairman testifies next, hands a country of scars and a loop in his pocket like a monocle for glass. He remembers a man who brought a watch with a cracked crystal the day after the day, paid cash, asked for speed, stood waiting the way fishermen stand, patient and coiled in the same body. He remembers because he wrote 11 April 1993 in the tiny memo square he keeps for rush jobs. He remembers because the man asked if the new crystal could take a knock. He remembers because he had to file a burr off the crown, and the crown smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and metal, a smell he associates with boiler rooms and ships. He points at the suspect when asked if this is the man. He hesitates 1 second too long for the cameras and then says yes. The defense asks if he might be remembering a different face wearing the same uniform of life, the same blue collar, the same night. He says faces blur. He says hands don't. He says the man had a scar that made the wrist look like a river course seen from a plane. He says he sees that now when the suspect's cuff slides back to scratch an itch. The kiosk owner falters, then rallies. He swears the suspect stood under his radio's clean spot some nights at the 40, caught the foreign match that stuttered in through a brave skywave, talked low about goals in a league nobody in Lisbon pretends to love. The prosecutor places the logs 2305 next to that habit like 2 magnets turned the wrong way. The defense flips 1 magnet and says the world swivels. The judge writes the time again and lets it sit like a coin in a fountain the room keeps throwing wishes at. A tied mathematician returns with a better map and a coffee stain that looks like Africa in the corner. He has arrows like a flock of geese. He has numbers that turn into paragraphs if you listen. He has the kind of patience that makes jurors breathe slower without meaning to. He explains the eddy that hugs the pilings, the probability that a small object dropped from the service dock might lodge on the downstream side of a particular stone like a memory that refuses therapy. The prosecutor nods because the candy tin has given the city something hard to hold. The defense nods too because probabilities are doors with doormats that say welcome and beware at the same time. The candy tin yields the sliver of enamel to a lab with lenses like vigilant moons. It is a cufflink, not a tooth, not an earring, a cheap cufflink with a square of faux mother of pearl and a back stamped with a manufacturer that died in 1997. It proves nothing except that men in cheap shirts liked cheap ornaments in the 90s, and that the river is a hoarder of small pride. The coins are commuters' fossils, a 2 escudo, another 2, a 1 that remembers a pocket that forgot it. The tin itself remembers the hand that set it there, but the hand refuses to give a print because water eats those for breakfast. In Almada, a woman opens her door with a face that says she did not wash her hair for this. She is the suspect's neighbor from the 4th floor, and she speaks like a person grading her own sentences as she goes. She says he was kind to plants and careless with conversation. She says he carried a coat down one winter and returned jaw set, eyes somewhere that wasn't the hallway. She says she thought nothing and now thinks everything. The defense thanks her for honesty and then ties her timeline to the mast of memory in a windstorm. Could it have been another winter? Could it have been a blanket? Could it have been a bag? She nods at each could like a boat at chop. The journalist's second tape becomes an exhibit with a number too clean for its mess. It is played in a room that has already learned the hum by heart. This one hums the same song, but the melody that wanders on top is cleaner, closer, a human throat deciding between notes. It is not words. It is a person keeping company with the machine that keeps the night. The engineer refuses certainty, refuses to bless or condemn, says only that he would place this sound in a corridor like the fairies, at a time when ballast sang and fans argued with damp. The mother does not look up. She watches her hands in her lap and pretends they belong to someone whose life is not archived on a metal tape. The suspect's son sits in a witness room and tries to fold a paper cup into a ship and ends up with a crumpled bird, a small defeated thing that makes him smile because small defeated things sometimes survive by humor. He does not testify. He meets a counselor in a room with a plant that tries its best. He says his father taught him rope and silence. He says he cannot make the two into a map. He says he can make a knot and undo it blind. He says he is not sure what that proves. A commuter bus rides past the ferry building, and a kid at the window points at the police tape and tells his brother a story that isn't exactly true and isn't exactly false, the way kids make ballads out of evening news. The ferry slides on time, a patience the river respects. The locker corridor smells like lemon and court orders. A panel stays open to remind the air there is nothing else to hide. A box of evidence breathes out dust a clerk will later apologize to no one for. A brass button waits in plastic for a meaning the city might grant it or steal back. The broken latch on locker 12, replaced long ago, creaks for reporters the way old floorboards throw compliments at actors they once liked. In court, a pathologist without a body uses the voice of a person who has learned to build from absence. He outlines what probability looks like when time passes, what despair does to behavior, what survival means when the river decides it has nothing to return. He does not say murder, he says likely, he says consistent with, he says patterns. The defense objects to the weight of a pattern trying to sit where proof belongs. The judge lets the words in and tells the jury of eyes to feed them carefully, one at a time, not like candy, more like medicine, more like a diet a doctor recommended for a heart that has tried too hard for too long. The journalist airs a new episode where he refuses to pronounce solved the way the headlines do, where he pronounces it the way a person pronounces a foreign word they were taught in a hurry, careful, wrong, the humility audible. He tells the story of the watch crystal and the kiosk radio and the candy tin that lived like a buried animal and the way a city turns ordinary objects into relics when a narrative needs altars. He walks the route again, on foot with a microphone tucked into his coat, rain finding the collar he forgot to raise, and lets the city speak in puddles and breaks and a child's loud joy at pigeons that refuse discipline. He stops at the azulejo wall with the missing shard and places his palm flat against the bite and counts to 10. As if the tile were a chest, he could start again by sheer stubbornness. Back in the court, the defense calls a scaffolding foreman from 1996, the man of the limp. He remembers the fall. He remembers the suspect's knee, learning a new weather prediction trick. He remembers the limp beginning then, not before. He says anyone who remembers a limp in 1993 remembers their own tired feet in the wrong year. The prosecutor nods because this lie limp serves no one and unties a knot he had not planned to unpick. The room exhales. Memory shrugs, unfazed at being called unreliable, accustomed to the accusation, likely to reoffend tomorrow. By late afternoon, the light goes thin and beautiful and cruel, the kind of light that forgives nothing in a face and makes the river look like mercury poured and paused. The mother walks home with a bag of bread she does not intend to eat. She will slice it thin and feed it to the birds on the sill as if feeding them could keep one small thing alive she can control. She thinks about the tape and decides not to press play because sometimes not listening is the only way to hear anything at all. She sits in her chair and watches the square as if the pavement owes her a confession. It doesn't. It offers the small theater it always offers at this hour. A woman with an orange scarf. A man with a box of pastries that might be for a child or a lover or an apology. A dog with a dignity that embarrasses humans. Night arrives with a practiced hand. The courthouse empties, the way a stage empties when the actors leave their light behind. A janitor mops to the rhythm of a song that does not exist except in the friction of cotton and tile. The suspect lies awake in a room that calls itself sleep and counts a constellation on the ceiling that keeps adding stars the longer he stares. The river folds black over black and keeps its own counsel. Somewhere below the surface, the tin's gap fills with silt that used to be mountains. Somewhere above, a tram dings and a drunk sings and someone says cold case the way other people say goodnight. The word solved still glows on screens and windows like shrines. Not blinding now, just present, like a candle that refuses to spend itself the way we want. And the city, which has learned to be a jury and a choir and a gossip and a monk, breathes, and the breath fogs the glass, and a finger draws a heart on that fog and then wipes it away fast, embarrassed by the living insistence of hope, which arrives uninvited to the worst parties and stays late and cleans up bottles and writes a note for the morning that says, quietly, see you tomorrow. The third week arrives with a knot in its pocket, and the habit of silence, dawn washing the river in dull pewter, the courthouse doors opening like a yawn they're tired of performing, cameras jolting awake, the word solve still perched on every broadcast like a decorative bird that doesn't sing. Inside, the suspect's step has the stiffness of someone rehearsing innocence in his bones. The lawyer's hands stack notes into a city of rectangles. The prosecutor sets down a folder so red it looks like a warning light, and the judge brings the room to heel with the tilt of her head. No gavel needed, the ceiling already trained to listen. Outside, umbrellas tap tempo on the stone. A reporter mouths the day's script into a lens that blinks like a patient. A new witness sits where every story sits when it's about to change, on a chair that shines with borrowed gravity. He is thin the way time thins people, a former night watchman from a building 2 streets off the ferry hall, face like a draft map, lines that don't always agree. He left Lisbon in 1995, he says, followed work that paid in cash and gasoline, slept more in vans than in beds. He has returned because a podcast told him he might be needed, because a neighbor texted him a link with his name spelled wrong and the past written right. He says on April 10th, 93, he heard feet in Corridor B 20 minutes before the last ferry. 2 sets, quick, then 1, slower, the way a story loses a character and pretends it meant to. He called in a report weeks later, he admits, ashamed of hesitation, ashamed of confusing the hum with a cry, the fan with a throat, the city's background noise with a single person who would not live long enough to be background to anyone. The defense asks what he had to drink then. The watchman says beer, sometimes 2, sometimes 4. The defense asks how many he had the night he thinks he heard the feet. He says none because he had a stomach that punished alcohol with fire that year. The prosecutor asks if he kept a record. He says he kept tapes, little ones, because he liked being able to rewind the day and hear if he'd imagined the clicks of locks. He brought 2 with him in a plastic bag from a supermarket that doesn't exist anymore. The engineer leans forward because tape is a dialect he speaks in his sleep. The judge allows the bag into evidence, numbers it as if numbers could domesticate ghosts. They play 1, hiss, the river as machine, a line hum that scratches the room's nerves at 50 hertz, the chorus of cheap fluorescent ballasts arguing with damp. And under that, a brief interval of silence like a hand over a mouth, followed by 2 footsteps, a pause, 2 more, lighter, as if a person tried to walk like a shadow. It is not proof, the engineer will later say. It is a map to a feeling. The defense nods as if agreement could turn feeling into fog. The prosecutor writes corridor on a note card in letters tall enough to see from the back row. A maintenance log the intern yanked from a throat of paper last week turns into a proper name today. ID is not a ghost. He is Ismail Dantas, hired spring 93, transferred winter 94, the man who wrote Fan Wines Like Cat on a Polaroid because poetry sneaks into the pockets of people paid to lift things. Dantas's daughter sits holding a red folder that smells like kitchen and rain. She unfolds the Polaroid for the court like a tablecloth before dinner. The fan's blades flash like tongues. Behind it, the lockers march into the distance like soldiers who haven't been told which country they're in. On the back, the date, underlined twice, the day before. The prosecutor says proximity like he's measuring the space between breath and word. The defense says coincidence with the weary kindness of a man explaining gravity to a child. The judge makes another square around another date as if boxing time could keep it from escaping. The journalist with the velvet voice becomes the city's custodian of hush. He records in stairwells and doorways by the chapped lip of the key. His episode on hums is now something people send each other at midnight with the subject line, "Listen with headphones." A physicist writes to him about harmonics like ghosts on ladders. An electrician writes about ballasts like unreliable friends. A mother writes about the way grief trains ears to select the note that hurts and call it truth. He reads them aloud under his breath in a taxi that smells faintly of cigarettes and lemon cleaner, the city's 2 colognes. The watch repairman returns with a paper he found wedged behind a drawer, yellow as tea, a rush job slip, narrower than a receipt, with a smudged stamp that gives the time and the day after the day, and a note in neat script. Replaced crystal, filed crown, customer waiting, cash. The clock that stamped the slip was synced, he swears, because he set it by the radio each morning and he had the kind of heart that liked clocks to agree. The defense calls time a liar. The repairman says time may lie, but stamps don't learn to exaggerate. He points at the suspect, then looks down at his own hands as if they've betrayed him before and are sorry. A surprise rumor keeps its appointment with noon. A crate of lost property is discovered in a municipal warehouse downriver, labels ruined by humidity, a cross-section of a city's pockets in 1993, scarves with nobody's winter to serve, pens that still click, a key ring with a decorative anchor, a coin purse with no coins, and a dark coat, size small, a missing button, inside lining repaired by a tailor who used green thread when he ran out of black, the kind of detail tailor shops love, and the kind of detail courts devour. The coat is bagged, logged, escorted like a celebrity who doesn't know why the cameras came. The mother hears about it on a whisper's edge and has to sit down. The city hears and stands up. In a lab, tweezers lift a hair so thin it could be a crack in light. Not enough for certainty, enough for coercion. The coat's label says nothing honest, a brand that sold itself in 100 shops, none very careful. The missing button's twin in evidence wears a threading like a fingerprint's distant cousin. The engineer says threading is like accent. Sometimes it narrows a street, rarely does it dead-end it. The prosecutor says link, the defense says leash. The judge writes, possible match, language to carry on a flatbed, not a shoulder. The neighbor from Almada sits again, surprised to hear the prescription of the green thread before she mentions it. She recalls the coat by a pale lining, peeking like a secret. She recalls his jaw set, his eyes elsewhere, the cold stitched to his sleeves. The defense asks if she could be remembering the wrong winter. She says winters repeat, some nights don't. She says the night she cannot forget is the one where she thought she heard the river climbing the stairs, which is impossible, and yet she put a towel under her door. The tied mathematician becomes a regular, as familiar as a bell. He brings a new napkin, new arrows, a confidence that doesn't grandstand. He maps where the coat could have floated had it been thrown, how a current holds fabric like a palm, how weight sneaks into fibers, how lungs aren't the only things that fill with water. He does not talk about bodies. He talks about objects and their loyalties. He refuses poetry, and in doing so writes it. The defense calls a list of rooms in the city that hummed at 50 hertz in 1993. It is longer than anyone wanted. Substations, hospitals, municipal offices, tunnels, basements that held computers so big they made grown men cry. The engineer agrees politely that sound has cousins everywhere. He adds gently that cousins don't always have the same laugh. He overlays spectrograms like fingerprints and points to small teeth marks in the hum you only see if you zoom in until patience burns your eyes. He will not say corridor B only. He will say corridor B fits like a familiar coat. The court watches the suspect rub his left knee when he stands. The scaffolding foreman's testimony sits in the room like a chair no one takes. Injury in 96. Limp postdates the night. A rumor that had built itself into an armrest evaporates. The defense nods. The prosecutor nods. The judge underlines 96 as if granting the year a passport. A man with a voice like sand calls the journalist at dusk. He used to sleep under the viaduct in 93, he says. He saw a bundle. He saw two men carry it like a rolled carpet. He saw one peel away. He saw the other head toward the service corridor. He saw a key used with the efficiency of habit. He did not go to police because men with beds are believed, men with pavements are not. He tells it now because a podcast made him remember that he is not furniture in the city. He is a man who saw a thing. On the stand he trembles, then steadies, answers, wears a tiny grin when he says he's been sober 9 years. The defense respects him and questions him into the place where his story cannot be disproved or gilded, which is where most true things live. Back at evidence, a clerk with a quirk for order arrays the brass button, the coat's buttonhole, the tailor's green thread like a constellation he would like to name. He photographs, he logs, he imprints reality with numbers so it will stand still. He remembers the first time he saw the mother, the way her hands held the cassette as if it bit. He does not write that down. He adds the candy tin to the grid, its lid now obedient, its coins shining a little after the bath, its cufflink sulking, unhelpful, beautiful, in a vulgar way. The river is a museum. The court is a label maker. The mother crosses the ferry at an hour when commuters have surrendered their seats to tourists and ghosts. She stands by the rail where the wind knifes kindly and watches the wake unspool a road no one can walk. She does not speak to cameras. She speaks to the water the way you speak to a neighbor you never learned the name of but see every morning. A nod, a truce, a small confession about the weather. She holds the exhibition brochure her daughter folded in 1993, the crease now a continent. She thinks about the half orange that began this story in her kitchen, how the fly walked the wet crescent like a pilgrim. She goes home and puts half an orange on a plate by the window and opens the tape drawer and does not press play. The prosecutor begins to test fit closing language on his tongue. Not yet, but soon. He paces an office with a view of the river's silver spine and says sequence aloud as if it were a saint. He sets down cards. Watch slip, maintenance log, corridor B tapes, buttons thread, coat neighbor, viaduct witness, hum signature. He hesitates at the coat. He hears the defense. Lost property is an ocean. The wrong fish can end up in the right net. He breathes out a word he hates but respects. Maybe. The defense burns midnight on a different altar. Chain of custody, the old gold. Transfer DNA, the bright new skepticism. The list of humming rooms, a choir to drown a corridor. They decide not to touch the mother. Some things you don't subtract from. The city knows math well enough to punish that move. They prepare to build a house out of uncertainty, to show that doubt is not fog, but architecture in this case, something you can lean on without falling. The journalist edits the new episode to the metronome of rain. He leaves in his own breath once when the viaduct witness says the word bundle and the tape catches the way syllables can carry weight. He finishes at 2 a.m., walks the dark kitchen tiles with bare feet, drinks water, stares at the azulejo magnet on his fridge shaped like the elevator the girl sketched in her notebook. He says her name once into an empty room and does not record it. He sleeps badly and dreams of lockers that hum scripture and refuse to open. Morning swings back like a door that knows its hinge. The courtroom is backlit by a sky that decided on pearl. A court officer straightens a framed photograph that always tilts when humidity rises. The suspect looks like a man who has spent the night counting the seams in a pillow. The watch repairman brings a magnifier because he hates not seeing. The neighbor in the orange scarf from the square appears in the gallery with eyes that won't blink on cue. The mother wears a different coat, darker, not because of signs, because of weather. She sits the way cliffs sit. You do not think of moving them, you think of getting your footing. The engineer explains a new analysis as simple as slicing bread. He overlapped the two tapes, 93 cassette, 94 microcassette, matched their teeth in the hum, found a tiny wobble at 83 hertz, where a ballast was failing. He found the same wobble on a VHS the ferry company shot for a training video in March 93, a camera panning lazily down corridor B while a supervisor mentioned safety in a voice that sounded bored by fear. The wobble is like a limp you only notice if you mimic the gait, the same limp. The prosecutor's eyes flicker with the caution he's learned. The defense asks how many ballasts may have limped the same in the city. The engineer says enough for humility, not enough for collapse. The coat goes to the tailor who used green thread if he's alive. He isn't. But his apprentice is, now a master with a shop that smells like steam and wool and tiny miracles. He runs a finger along the repair, clucks. He used this stitch only when a customer begged him to keep a lining whole for a sentimental reason. An inscription, a name, a phone number fashioned in laundry ink, a superstition sewn into cloth. He unpicks a centimeter and reveals ink like a bruise, a phone number with 5 digits and 2 smudged. The prefix matches the ferry exchange from the early 90s. The city inhales. The prosecutor says this places the coat in the ferry family. The defense says families share phones, coats change backs. A clerk dials the number for ritual. Dead. He writes it anyway, the act of writing away to press meaning into a page that has seen so much. Night lands again. Not tired, merely thorough. Tram bells sketch parentheses around conversations. Pigeons settle like commas. The court empties except for a janitor who sings under breath the way some men pray. The suspect lies awake listening for a train that will not pass. The mother holds the orange until the scent oils her palms and she smiles without wanting to because smell is a key. And some rooms in the brain are kind. The city rolls solved on its tongue like a lozenge, sweet, medicinal, unsatisfying if you're hungry, and prepares itself to be a chorus again tomorrow, when someone will say cold case into a microphone and someone else will answer, not solved for me, not yet. And the river will say nothing, and silence will be the only honest witness who doesn't need to be sworn. The fourth week arrives with a low ceiling and the stubborn chill that makes stone feel older, the courthouse waking into its now familiar choreography of shoulders brushing past microphones, umbrellas shaking themselves like dogs at the doorway, the whisper of solved still trying to pass as a fact while the city keeps it on probation. The suspect walks in with the careful gait of a man who has memorized how innocence should move. The lawyer's files build their annual rings on the table. The prosecutor stands at the window a heartbeat longer than yesterday, as if asking the river for a closing line. And the judge takes her seat with the quiet authority of a lighthouse that has outlived storms people don't even name anymore. A new sound slips into the room, paper rubbed thin by decades, the hiss of microfiche that smells like libraries and rain. A telecom archivist with half-moons under her eyes and a badge on a lanyard clinks down a box like a reliquary. She says lines and exchanges and extensions as if she were naming saints. In 1993, she says the ferry complex carried its own small kingdom of numbers, 4-digit extensions routed through a private branch that hiccuped when the humidity rose. Corridor phones were not meant for public calls. They were meant for yes here and no later, and the fan is whining again. She lays out a map that looks like a subway for whispers. Maintenance shared a block, 23XX. The number stitched into the coat's lining, smudged but not fatally. Where's the prefix 23? The last 2 digits could be 31 or 34. The apprentice tailor had unpicked a centimeter. The court lets the lab unpick another. The rest of the ink breathes up into the light, and there it is, 2331, the maintenance desk by corridor B. The room doesn't clap, it leans. The defense nods politely and writes a note that translates into phones move, coats wander, numbers go with men the way saints travel with sailors, nothing nails a knight to a throat. The archivist produces another relic, a payphone collection sheet from a kiosk 2 streets uphill from the bar, April 11th, 1993, showing a coin box unusually heavy for the late hour. Notation in a bored hand about a jam cleared at 22:45 the night before. The sheet does not name the caller. It does not bolt down a face. But weight has its own grammar. The prosecutor calls it proximity, and proximity sits down in the front row. The intern who digs like a fox through dead systems brings a diagram of the ferry PBX, lines penciled by a man 30 years gone who wrote small and neat, a legend for a city's forgotten throat. Extension 23331 rings on a phone mounted 3 steps from corridor B's door, behind glass, beside a corkboard with a safety notice and a photo flyer. There was a second handset in the locker room for emergencies, wired on the cheap, a cord like a vein. The defense says there were a dozen rooms in Lisbon with lines that began 23. The archivist shrugs the way truth suffers a misreading and survives. She adds a small piece. In April 93, the 2331 set was flagged twice for a sticky hook, meaning the Cradle sometimes kept a call live after fingers left, not proof, a detail with teeth. The watch repairman finds another slip. He swears his drawers are haunted by the past now, that paper breeds in dark wood. This one confirms the time again, a stamp aligned to a radio signal he trusted more than clocks trusted themselves. The suspect stood and waited while the crown was filed, he says. He remembers because the shop radio hissed about fog west of Cascais, and he thought, fog is everywhere tonight. He points to the suspect's wrist when asked, and the scar is there, pale as a low tide. The defense crosses softly. Could that scar belong to half the harbor? The repairman's mouth tightens. Half the harbor didn't stand under my light that day, he says, and then immediately looks sorry for sounding like a poet. The sound engineer brings a new trick that isn't trickery. He layers the 93 cassette hum and the 94 microcassette hum and the 93 ferry training VHS hum. He found another VHS, a second camera angle with a longer pan, and he points at the wobble at 83 hertz again, the ballast limp, then points at a faint notch at 180 hertz that shouldn't be there unless the fan's bearing was rough and carving a small tooth in the song. The intern's Polaroid of the fan becomes relevant like an old friend suddenly famous. A maintenance memo dated April 9th mentions a bearing complaint. The engineer calls it a signature. The defense calls it a cousin. The judge writes signature cousin and draws a line between them like a teacher refusing to grade in a hurry. A retired ferry foreman limps in, not from myth but from age, a man whose body keeps weather better than any app. He kept, he says, a shoebox of the old weird, salvage from renovations, the keys that no longer fit, the tags that fell behind desks, the latches that learned better manners after being replaced. He lays the shoebox down like contraband from the past. Inside, a ring with 3 old blanks, wave-notched in a pattern the earlier found key would recognize like family. He matches notches against notches. He's not a scientist. He is a man who has fed metal into locks in the rain. He says this, the wave key we found behind the molding would have turned the lock cores we removed in 1996, especially locker 12, which always took a scold before it obeyed. The foreman isn't saying the suspect had it. He's saying someone with a ring like this could move like water in that building. The prosecution nods. The defense nods. Both sides thank him the way soldiers thank weather reports. The journalist with the velvet voice stands under the bridge at an hour too late to be called night and too early to dress as morning. He doesn't record. He listens. A man approaches with a gait that tries not to be recognized by its own past. He is the viaduct witness, sober almost a decade, a scarf he's proud of. He says he remembered a thing. The bundle those 2 men carried wasn't heavy the way guilt is heavy. It was heavy the way tools are heavy. He thinks he saw a handle protruding, metal shine like a coin's edge. He draws it in the air with a finger. A toolbox? The journalist asks. The witness nods, then shakes his head because memory is a coin that insists on flipping. He will tell it in court. He will be careful. He will swear not to swear, only to say what he thinks his eyes didn't lie about. Inside, the defense lands a blow that doesn't knock down the room but makes it blink. The partial DNA from the cigarette butt, they say, doesn't sing one name. It sings a family choir. A cousin with a record in 2001 for petty theft registers a similar set of notes. Rui, says the paper, a cousin who left the ferry company in 1994 and worked short contracts on the South Docks, then a vineyard in Setúbal, then vanished into a Canada that no one has a phone number for. The prosecution says the partial points to a trunk, not a branch, and the suspect is the trunk. The defense says trunks don't blow smoke under viaducts, branches with nights to waste do. The judge reminds the room that trees are metaphors, not exhibits. Still, metaphors move people, and the gallery murmurs. The suspect's son stares at the floor, sees a knot in a plank, and decides to count it instead of thinking the cousin's name. The city learns the cousin's name by dinner. It does what cities do. It decides what he looks like and what he did and what he might have done to the shape of a night. It invents a photograph out of pixels and bias. The journalist refuses to say the name. He says instead, a line of men with similar blood, similar keys, similar shifts, similar silence. He lets the sentence end without a period, and the listeners supply their own. The coat returns with a ghost in its lining. The green thread repair hides not only the number, but a rust stain the size of a coin in shape of nothing in particular. The lab finds a trace of oil, a type used in ballasts and fans in the early 90s, not in domestic heaters, not in watches, not in kitchen appliances. The engineer shrugs. Ships breathe that oil. Corridors sweat it. It's like saying rain is wet. The prosecutor says it pulls the coat closer to the ferry. The defense says everything in Lisbon smelled like that when the river exhaled after a long day. A woman calls the tip line at an hour that makes her voice sound braver than it feels. She used to date a man who drank with the suspect's cousin, she says, and the cousin knew a man who could fix anything electrical for cash and passwords and a favor owed. A small loop, a circle that might close if you squinted. The detectives follow it to a flat above a shop that now sells phone cases. They find no cousin, no man who fixes anything, just a calendar from 1998 with a woman in a red swimsuit and a fishing rod and a wall socket that a careful hand once rewired. They take a photo of the socket because sometimes you can't help but collect symbols even when you've promised yourself to carry only facts. In court, a queue of ordinary voices begins to braid into something that feels like net. A ticket clerk who remembers the suspects bent toward solitude. A mechanic who remembers kindness done in the quiet way. A cleaner who remembers a coat hung on a peg after hours that wasn't anyone's she knew. The defense says these are wisps, not rope. The prosecutor says rope is braided out of wisps. The judge pours water. Everyone drinks. The mother walks once more to the ferry as if paying the river a debt she cannot name. She rides across and back, stays on when the deckhand nods, staring at the midstream where Lisbon organizes itself into two lines of light. She thinks about the word solved the way you think about a tune that won't settle into the right key. She carries the exhibition brochure as a talisman against the city's forgetting. She does not press play tonight. She counts tiles instead, the blue squares around her kitchen window, the place where the bite in the pattern is, the one that story keeps returning to as if it were a wound in the wall. The judge allows the training VHS audio into the record. The courtroom listens to Corridor B hum from 32 years ago while a supervisor drones about safety and the camera wanders past Locker 12, the latch that once stuck, the fan that would later die. The engineer marks the wobble and the notch with a pen on a printout, two little teeth everyone has learned to recognize like a relative's laugh in a crowded room. The defense stands and says, a city's hum belongs to a city. The judge nods. Noted. The jury of eyes absorbs the sound like weather. The intern brings Gumshoe to the table again. She found, in a municipal archive where folders have to be ordered like prayers, a memo from May 93 about a missing ring of maintenance keys, request to recore locks in the fall due to budget constraints. Recore happened in 96 after an accident on scaffolding shifted priorities. Budget, like gravity, won at first, 3 years of keys moving in pockets no one fully tracked. The foreman confirms that the interim policy was trust and check, which is not a policy so much as a hymn you hum and hope the chorus knows when to come in. The prosecution calls it access. The defense calls it fog. The viaduct witness testifies again and nearly breaks his own voice on the word bundle. He adds the metal glint, the handle, his shame. The defense treats him gently, as if roughness would make the truth shy. He leaves the stand with a look people reserve for sober anniversaries. A small surprise lands with the afternoon. The kiosk owner presents a cracked plastic bin of found things he swears he's been meaning to clear for years. Among the lighters shaped like grenades and key fobs that used to blink, a paper matchbook with the ferry company logo, 3 digits written inside with a pencil, 331, the kind of thing a man writes when he cannot get to a phone again but wants to remember the extension that answers everything. No name, no date. He offers it to the court with a shrug that says treasure and trash are cousins. The prosecutor holds it like a feather that feels heavier than it is. The defense smiles and says, why would a ferryman need to write a ferry number? The kiosk owner says, because sometimes numbers you live with slip your pocket. By evening, the city hums with a new rumor that tastes like copper. A second arrest is imminent, the cousin in a network of messages from a country where winters file you down to the grain. The police say nothing, the journalist says nothing, the people say everything. The suspect's son sits in his kitchen and unlearns how to make a paper ship, turns the square into a crane by accident, and laughs because for a second the hands did something the mind did not command, and there is a relief in that, a momentary holiday from narrative. The prosecutor sits very still and tries the word together on his tongue. Hum, phone, coat, button, keys, log, watch, witness, water. He places them side by side in his mind the way children line up toy soldiers before night. He does not let himself say solved. He says sequence, access, opportunity, proximity, and breathes like a man jogging in place. The defense writes doubt like calligraphy and pins it with thumbtacks to a corkboard of angles. Chain of custody with gaps like missing teeth, DNA that points to a clan, not a king, a coat that could be every cold night's coat, a phone number that's a hallway, not a room, witnesses whose certainty is stitched from habit and grief and good faith and the sly embroidery of time. He practices humility because juries like men who respect a wound. Night glides into place. The courthouse empties and leaves behind heat that takes a while to find the door. The cleaner hums the low note of the tape without meaning to. The suspect lies on a mattress that has learned his weight and stares at a ceiling that refuses to answer. He thinks of keys, of fans, of a watch crown filed while a man listened to a radio tell the weather, of a cousin who drank too much and smiled too easily and was lucky or unlucky depending on the night. The mother rinses the knife she used to cut the orange and the smell rises clean and forgiving. She leans her forehead to the cool window and whispers nothing that expects a reply. The journalist sits at his desk and writes a line he may never record. Some endings are scaffolds. They hold you up while you look at what's still missing. Then they come down, and you have to believe the structure can stand. The river keeps its counsel. The tiles hold their blue. Somewhere a phone that once rang 2331 sleeps in a box under a desk that now holds laptops and reusable bottles. The word solved drifts over screens like a paper lantern trying to choose between flame and lift. And the city, stubborn, superstitious, hungry, keeps walking toward the next morning when everyone will gather again under the gray and listen for a hum, a footstep, a whisper, anything that might turn proximity into a door that opens and calls itself truth.
Suy nghĩ lâu hơn, ChatGPT có thể mắc lỗi. Hãy kiểm tra các thông tin của họ.